Welcome to day 3 of our North Carolina Partnership to Address Adult Abuse Conference themed Partnering to Preserve and Protect. We're so glad that you could join us today for our final day of the conference. We do want to welcome you. We hope that if you're at your office, you have your coffee with you, that you're ready for a wonderful day. Um, I know that we do have several reminders, so I'm going to start off with a few. Just a reminder that everyone is in the mute uh, on the conference, and we also ask that you keep your cameras turned off at this time. That will help us with the bandwidth for the conference as well, and maybe it won't be breaking up with your internet. And no, we cannot call your internet provider to fix your internet issues, just to let you know that. But if you can try to keep your cameras off, that should help us go throughout the day. Um, we do want to say we do have the chat box at the bottom of your screen that you feel free to ask any questions throughout the conference that you can or that you'd like to get answered, and we'll be glad to assist you in answering those. And even during the presentations, we will have a question and answer session. Um, Also, I want to remind folks if you are calling in on your telephone and you're seeing your number on the screen in the participants list, if you're able to change the telephone number to your name, that will help us match up your phone to your record so that when we're doing the CEUs and being able to get that information together, it will match up. If you're not able to change the number to your name, just know that Allison Crossman, who is our host for the conference, using her Zoom platform, she will be reaching out to you to find out your name that goes with the phone number. So just know either way, we will get you settled up so that we can get your CEU straightened out for you. But we just wanted to ask you if you're able to change it, go ahead and do that. That will be really easy. Um, Also, a reminder, I know that you saw the slides as you were coming in that were going, but just in case you missed it, we do want to remind you that we will have a conference survey and it will be sent electronically. And you have to actually complete the survey to be able to get your certificate for the conference as well. So I just wanted to make that reminder. Um, for today's activities, we actually got a big agenda going. I know we in the morning after we have the morning keynote, then we have a 3 breakout sessions, and then we have 3 breakouts in the afternoon that we will take place. But I do want to give you some items of interest, some dates of interest that'll be upcoming throughout the next couple of months. June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. So just know Tuesday, June the 15th, that is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. I know yesterday Joyce Massey Smith gave us some information about what the Division of Age and Adult Services is doing, and she's going to send that to me, and we will get that posted on the website, so you all will have that information as well. And again, May is Older Americans Month, so again, we want to celebrate all those folks out there for Older Americans Month. July 21st is another big day that will actually be our next general partnership meeting. Um, it'll be from 9:30 to 11:30 on Wednesday, July 21st. The executive board has not met to determine if we're going to be meeting in person, but I'm sure we will have a virtual effect as well that day, and we will post a link on our website. So if you'll remember to continue going to the partnerships website, it will have the upcoming meeting information. But if you want to go ahead and jot that down on your calendar, that'll be a great reminder for us. We would love to have you attend. As we've said, I think both days or in the past 2 days, we've talked about hopefully asking you to become members to the partnership with a very low cost membership. There's even an organizational membership that you can have, I think, up to 6 people in your organization at one price, which is a great amount. And 2 of those members could be voting members. Also, if you're a student or if you're a senior citizen, there's special rates for those individuals as well. So again, we would love to have you to become part of us for the meetings and join in. But we also want to let you know that feel free. We would love to have you on the board if you'd like to take a leadership role with our board. We'd be glad to have you work with us as well. And speaking of our board, I just want to thank those individuals. Matter of fact, I would like to ask the board members if they would just go ahead and turn their camera on for a moment, just so that you all can see their faces. I know that you saw them in the slides earlier, but I just would like to call some of those out. Pam Palmer, she is our treasurer. So hello to Pam. And um, Laura Schlabach, she is our secretary. She does a wonderful job, and I can't thank her enough. She is magnificent at getting the minutes out for us. And after the past 14 months of us being in virtual meetings, and how fast that she can do the minutes and get them out just amazes me. So I really appreciate that. I know Laura Cogman, she's the chair for the partnership, and she's not able to be with us this week. She's had some family commitments that she had to be a part of. So I want to thank her for what she's done. My role at the partnership, I'm actually the chair elect. And then we have John Marion and Stephanie Bias, who both are part of our awareness committee. And then Nancy Warren. Nancy is our advocacy committee chair, and she's immediate past president as well. So Nancy has been invaluable with her role over the years and helping us get started with the partnership. I can't thank her enough as well. I'm trying to remember everybody. Let's see. Oh, how can I miss the big ones? Ann Elmore and Tadra. They are our committee for chairing the conference. And I would, if we were all together, I would ask you to give them a standing ovation because they have put together a wonderful round of breakout sessions, and the speakers have been amazing. I think we've already got some topics scheduled or some ideals scheduled for next year. So I would just say hats off to those ladies for what they've done. Again, another one, Autumn Cox. Autumn, she is wonderful to work with. She has been our communications chair. I don't know if you've noticed the website over the past 2 days, but at the end of the day, Autumn has already got all the slides on the website for us from the presenters that we've had. And even the recordings, if they've been downloaded, she's already has those posted as well. So Autumn, great job. Kudos to you. And she's even said that after today's conference, she'll have everything else posted as well. So again, and I think Autumn is trying to tell me, Pam, I mentioned Pam Palmer already. She's outstanding, and she helps me out so much personally as well. Even helping me with the bank and trying to get the bank settled. So thank you all for that. Now, this morning, I'm trying to think any more messages that we need to pass along. Somebody's saying, don't forget to like us on Facebook. Nancy Warren, thank you for Nancy for that shout out. And we do live stream our general meetings on Facebook Live on stream. And so feel free. It's amazing that the partnership, we have no paid staff members. So we are doing this all as a volunteer board. So I want to just shout out to all those folks that are on the board. Now, there's another group of folks that we really have to thank today, and that is the folks who helped do financial support for this conference and getting it off the ground and making it free for you're able to attend today. And that is AARP of North Carolina. Lisa Regal and Steve Hahn, you guys have done a great job of helping us financially, and they actually connected us with Allison Crossman, who is the host for our conference through the Zoom. We're using her platform for this. Allison has been great to work with. So if you all are looking to put on a virtual conference, you may want to reach out to Allison. I know her email address has been in the emails that you've seen daily, so just know that as well, but she's wonderful to work with. So I know in a minute, in about 7 minutes, we'll get started with our main speakers. I know this morning before we get started, we want to go ahead and tell everybody that we're going to put the slides up since it's going to be, I think, 3 to 4 speakers this morning. We're going to go ahead and start the slides up for those individuals, and you'll be able to read their bios. And then right at 9:45, John Marion with the Secretary of State's office, and he's also on the board, he will lead us off with their wonderful presentation about the Helpful Project. So again, I'm going to go ahead and ask Allison to start our morning slides for the presenters, and I will turn off my camera and you'll stop hearing me for now. All righty, folks. At this time, we're going to ask John Manning if he would like to turn his camera on, and I'll go ahead and let him take over for now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin. Welcome, everybody. I really appreciate you all joining us this morning. We've got a great crowd here this morning, and hopefully we'll have an interesting topic for you. If any of you have been within earshot of me over the last 18 months or so, you probably would have heard me talk about the helpful project that the Secretary of State's office has been working with our partners at Hunter College and the Department of Health and Human Services. So we thought it would this particular topic would be perfect for the conference, because the theme of the conference is partnering to protect. And that's exactly what the Helpful Project is all about. It's fostering partnership, it's fostering communication, and we're real excited to kind of go into a little deeper dive about it. I did want to, since in the interest of time, rather than having long introductions, we decided to do the slides as by way of introduction. And so we're just going to sort of bull through these the opening slides. I'm being assisted today by Sally Reich, who is actually running our slideshow in the background. So I appreciate all her help. As you saw in the intro, the lead agency on this is the Silberman School of Social Work. Jeff Rogers is the director of learning and development there. He and Sally, who runs sort of the grant process, they're the ones that sort of spearheaded this whole project. And then we've got Sarah Manis-Smith, who's with the Department of Health and Human Services Division on Aging. She is the Adult Services Program Administrator. And then, of course, you have me, who I'm with the Secretary of State's office. I do the investor education, fraud prevention outreach, along with Ann Elmore. So we're going to go right on in. We're going to let Sarah sort of kick things off from the perspective of the Division of Aging and Adult Services. So, Sarah, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, John, for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to the partnership for the invitation to speak with you this morning. I wish it could be in person, but we'll settle for virtual. I think everybody's probably gotten a lot more comfortable with virtual over the last year than maybe we were prior to that. Like John said, I am the Adult Services Program Administrator with the division. And just a little bit about the division. Our mission is to promote the independence and enhance the dignity of North Carolina's older adults, persons with disabilities, and their families through a community-based system of opportunities, services, benefits, and protections. One of the ways that the Adult Services section helps with this goal is through our work with each of the 100 county departments of social services. By gathering statistical data on adult protective services, developing and delivering training, and providing programmatic oversight, the division helps to ensure the protection of this vulnerable population. Next slide, please, Sally. So we have seen this steady increase of financial exploitation over the years. I'm sure John can speak more to this than I can, but over 30,000 reports were received statewide this past state fiscal year. And while only a portion of those were financial exploitation, if you consider the national statistics on reporting, one out of about 20 are reported, and only 25% of those reported are ever prosecuted. So if you do the math, and I always tell people I'm not a mathematician, I'm a social worker, that's a lot of reports that aren't being made. This problem is much larger than we realize, and we have to work together to keep it from growing. Next slide, please, Sally. So, if financial exploitation is a problem, why aren't the reports being made? So that question has a lot of different answers. If the reporter is a family member or other caretaker, they may not want to start trouble or cause problems within the family. There could be a long history of family dynamics that come with an even longer backstory that may make the reporter not want to get involved. Another reason could be that the adult may depend on the alleged perpetrator to help meet their daily needs, help pay their bills, make sure that they have food, help take them to their medical appointments, and may also be the reason that they don't have to move into a nursing home or another facility. Each of these reasons, or a combination, are often why a reporter or a vulnerable adult are hesitant to reach out for help. Next slide, please. So, and then one more slide, Sally. Thank you. So, an alleged perpetrator, who are they? Well, from what we have learned from gathering data, they can be anyone that may know or be associated with that vulnerable adult. Based on the data gathered during state fiscal year 2019-2020, the most frequently named perpetrator was an adult child. Then that was actually followed by a spouse or another relative or non-relative caretaker. So the next slide, please, Sally. So what is the role? As I mentioned in an earlier slide, our statute, which is North Carolina Statute, General Statute 108A, defines financial exploitation. This statute outlines the responsibility of the county departments of social services as it relates to the evaluation of the need for protective services. After receiving that information about a disabled adult that may have been abused, neglected, or exploited, that county screens the report to determine if it meets statutory definitions. If that report meets those guidelines, then the social worker from the county agency will meet with that disabled adult privately and discuss the allegations that were made. That reporter's information isn't revealed to the disabled adult or any of the other collaterals that the social worker may speak with. Confidentiality is key during an APS evaluation, and once that thorough evaluation is completed, a decision is made as to whether or not that disabled adult is in need of protective services. And next slide. So now that brings us to Helpful and how can Helpful help? So one of the major factors with the Helpful platform that we found in North Carolina is the ability for financial institutions that make an adult protective services report to share their financial information. Oftentimes, if the reporter is a large financial institution, it may be difficult for the county agency to make the connection back to the employee that has all of that information. The Helpful platform allows direct communication between the reporter at the financial institution. Another unintentional benefit is the connection that DAS has been able to make with the Secretary of State's office. This connection has allowed us to expand our current financial exploitation training with the Secretary's office. They actually now serve as co-trainers, and for those county staff that have taken that financial exploitation, and Elmore is probably a familiar name. We've also been able to help familiarize the county DSS with how the Secretary of State's office can help with our adult protective services evaluation when it comes to financial exploitation. And now I'm going to actually turn it over to John with the Secretary's office to talk a little bit more about how they're working with us and Helpful.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. So yes, you know, we, the Secretary of State's office, Sarah sort of contacted us about 18 months or so ago and said, hey, we're interested in doing a pilot project with the Department of Justice. and would you all be interested? And so we said, sure, we'd love to partner with you. So um, I'll give you a little background first on the Secretary of State's office, and then sort of show you how it all sort of interconnects. So there's my contact information. I want people to feel free to call me or contact me if they have any questions, particularly those of you in the Adult Protective Services who are interested in maybe doing some additional training. As Sarah mentioned, Ann Elmore has been a person on my team who has been active and going and either going in person prior to the pandemic or doing remote video trainings during the pandemic. So both of us are available, and hopefully we'll spur you to reach out to us. Next slide, please, Sally. So seniors are the #1 target, as we all know, for all types of fraud, in particular, including investment fraud. And why is that? Well, simply because they have the cash. A lot of seniors are at a time of their life where they have accumulated their assets, and they're in a form that is easily liquidated, so they can pay bills or whatever. And that's what the con artists are looking for. They're looking for people that have cash. Seniors also have usually, regular income of a government check or a pension or something coming in. And again, that is really what con artists are looking for. Next slide. So when we talk about the Helpful Project and how we interact with the Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Aging, and APS, we started looking at how it was that cases are referred. And most of you in the APS world are very familiar with these forms. And you'll see on the next several, we can kind of scroll through these, Sally. We'll go to the next one if you wish. You can see that there are indications of referrals to local law enforcement and also to the local district attorney. Those are mandatory reporting entities. You can go to the next slide, Sally. Let's see, are we having some issues? I don't know. Yeah, okay. And then go on to the next one as well. There you go. So you can see that there are these mandatory reporting entities. Now, the Secretary of State's office is not listed on any of these forms. If we're listed at all, we're listed as the other. And we determined as we were starting into this project that we really weren't getting any kind of referrals from the APS offices. And we figured it was largely due to just simply not knowing that we existed. And so what we tried to do is started our outreach sort of at the grassroots level, and we started certainly with Sarah and her team as far as getting the word out that the Secretary of State's office is available as a law enforcement agent. Now, we are not a mandatory reporting entity. And I want to make sure that that's understood. We are an additional resource that is available, but you still have to do your mandatory reportings as required by state statute. Next slide, please. So that's sort of where Helpful comes into. You can go, I think this is on a cycle cell. There you go. One more, I think. There you go. Back. So yeah, so who can help? The Helpful platform was developed with the idea of fostering communication. And Jeff and Sally will talk a little bit more specifically about the platform and how it was developed. But it's designed, the way it was initially designed was for financial institutions, your brokerage firms, who, when they suspect that one of their elderly clients is being abused financially or exploited, that they have a mechanism, an electronic portal, if you will, to make a mandatory, or not a mandatory, but to make a referral to the local APS office as well as the state securities regulator, so that they would be notified that there's some possibility that this particular individual is being exploited. And so the portal is a way to sort of, again, foster that communication. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, there are many mandatory reporting requirements. You have to report to local police or the sheriff's office, and to the district attorney representing your county. Next slide, please. So, the Secretary of State's office is, as I said, also a law enforcement agency. We have unique jurisdiction here in the state. Next slide. I like to refer to us as a boutique law enforcement agency. Next slide, please. We have responsibility to enforce and administer the laws regarding the North Carolina Securities Act, which includes investments, the Investment Advisors Act, which includes the investment professionals who are out there, advising people on how to invest their assets. We also have responsibility for intellectual property through our Trademark Registration Act. And we also regulate and enforce the state security, solicitations, charities. Next slide. So we're talking about securities here. We're talking about investments. And so it's important, when we are working with our APS offices, and part of the training that Ann and I do is to sort of explain a little bit about what it is that we in the Secretary of State's office do and how we can assist. And one of the biggest things is to try to help folks understand what a security is. It's a legal term, and there's no real definition of what a security is. There's the North Carolina statutes sort of define it by listing out a laundry list of financial products that are statutorily designated as a security. And then it also talks about those types of financial instruments that are specifically not securities. But we're not trying to make you into a securities expert out there. Really, what we want you to understand is that in its essence, a security is any type of an investment in which the investor, the person with the money, has a reasonable expectation of making a profit from the efforts of a third party. So in other words, the person with the money, all they're being asked for is to give this other individual their money so that that person can then do something with it that's going to generate more money for both of them. The person with the money plays no active role, has no active role in the success or failure of the venture. They are passive. And that's really, when we, in a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about a form that we developed to help you with this. But really, when you're taking an intake, when you're hearing something from a person out there that suspects that their loved one or a neighbor or friend or whatever is being financially abused, it helps us in the investigation part of it to understand what it is that this person has gotten themselves into. And if we're talking about an investment, we're talking about something where the alleged victim has been induced to give somebody some money in the expectation that they're going to get money back. Okay. And so that's really what is involved here. And so as much information as you can provide to us that sort of talks about that narrative, that's very helpful. Next slide, please. So what are the warning signs of investment fraud? Well, the biggest red flag of them all is the so-called promise. I guarantee you are going to make X amount of money back with little or no risk. Those are huge red flags to a potential investment fraud, because as we all know, the market goes up and the market goes down. There is no guarantees when it comes to investing. So when somebody is out there talking about guarantees and mentioning any specific rate of return, then that is a red flag. So as you're doing your intake, listen to what the people are telling you. And if you hear those kinds of words, well, this person told me that if I gave them $25,000 that I would get 7% interest back over 3 years. That sounds like a security. That's the kind of thing that we are involved with. Oftentimes the bad guys will promote themselves and tout their titles, their job titles. Sometimes they hand business cards out that have lots of little letters after their names. Sometimes those letters mean something, but oftentimes they don't, okay? There are very few of these professional designations that actually exempt the holders of those from having to take the licensing exams to be a lawful investment professional. And so it's just very, it's something that you have to be very careful of. So again, if you're taking intake and you're hearing that the alleged perpetrator is puffing up their credentials, that too is a red flag that there might be something going on, and that would be helpful for us to know. Registered investment advisors are specifically prohibited from using any of these special designations in promoting themselves, because again, the idea is that these titles are making people appear as though they are more knowledgeable and experienced about this stuff than they might actually be. So the law has a prohibition against false and deceptive sales practices. And so again, the legitimate folks are prohibited from really using these fancy titles. Next slide, please. So what does all this mean to you? Next slide, please. We hope that you will use the helpful platform, and you can advance to it, Sally. I think it's got those same 3 bullets. There we go. Again, right now, the helpful platform is sort of a one-way street. It's coming down from the financial institutions to us and to you. Jeff is going to talk a little bit about where we hope helpful will go in the future. Next slide, please. So in the meantime, until helpful does sort of have this two-way street where you can take intake and put it into the system and send it sort of upstream, we recognize, going back to those earlier forms, that APS workers really didn't have a way of either knowing about the Secretary of State's office or making any kind of referral. So what we decided to do was we created a form. I know it's really kind of small on your screen. All of these slides are going to be available, as Kevin said earlier, on our website later today or tonight, when Autumn has a chance to upload them. And so you'll be able to download this stuff. But we developed this form. It's a very simple, very straightforward form. It really only has 3 pages, and we'll cycle through these. And really what we're asking for is just basic information. And if you can go back 2 slides to the first one, Sally, right there. If you notice, there's this gray box right there at the top, and I know you can't read it, and I'm not expecting you to, but in that we talk about, we got to give you the overview of what a security is, and the kinds of questions maybe that you might ask as you're doing your intake. The more information, just like any investigation, the more information you can collect and pass on to us, the easier and quicker it is for us to make a determination if there's, if we have jurisdiction, and if we need to refer it to somebody else. Okay. You can, you know, we made the general statement and the offer that, you know, until such time as Ann and I can get around and do more training, you know, you can use us as a referral point for sort of any type of financial crime that, or exploitation that you might see. That puts a little burden on us, you know, because frankly, you know, I know that a lot of the stuff that you all hear about really isn't in our wheelhouse, that it's really maybe something that another agency would handle. But we want to help you, you know, help reinforce the idea of you bringing stuff to us, thinking about Secretary of State's office as a partner in helping to solve and thwart some of these financial crimes. You can forward 2 slides, 3 slides. There you go. So here's my contact information again. You can reach out to me or to Ann. There's our email addresses and our phone numbers. Please, if you're interested in having some in-service training on this topic, Ann and I stand ready to and willing to come, hopefully come soon, and or do some virtual things. At this point, I think I will now turn it over to Jeff and Sally.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about this project. We're really excited about this. This is a project that was funded by the Office of Victims of Crime of the U.S. Department of Justice. And I've got to sort of read, Sally, just go back to that. I just want to read that. The opinions and findings and conclusions and recommendations expressed in this notice are those of the contributor and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. So the next slide. So the idea came when we, I worked with a woman and continue to work with a woman who used to be the elder abuse coordinator in the Manhattan DA's office. Her name is Liz Lowy. And Liz and I go back too many years for me to recount because you would be able to know how old I am. So anyway, she found this solicitation from DOJ, and it was basically developing technological innovations that would address financial exploitation of older and or vulnerable adults. And what, so anyway, we gathered a group, including the National Adult Protective Services Association. And by that time, when Liz had approached me, she had left the DA's office and she was working for this outfit called eversafe.com, which kind of does some of the same things in terms of looking for helping people who sign up to the platform, helping them to monitor or red flag fraud or instances of financial exploitation. And also with Jason Burnett at the University of Texas McGovern's Medical School, and the Securities Information Financial Markets Association. So we all sort of came together and sort of created this idea of creating a platform would facilitate and encourage financial institutions not to report instances or suspected instances of financial exploitation. And as you know, if you all folks who are doing this work, financial exploitation, it's usually about intervention and mitigation. It's very difficult to sort of say to prevent. You can do a lot of education, but most of the time when we've identified financial exploitation, it is in play. Next slide, thanks. So, oh, well, that was fast. So helping, it's back. So helping victims of financial exploitation. And so again, this was really just about the primary goals of this project was to encourage more reporting from financial institutions to adult protective services, and then create better and more sustained collaborations that would improve interventions and mitigation of financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. Next slide, please. So, John and Sarah have sort of outlined a lot of this. As you guys know, adult protective services for these kinds of cases is usually the primary in terms of the social services arm. And then the idea is to also, we expanded the idea to include state securities regulators because of the impact that they would bring in terms of these being able to help with the intervention and mitigation of the financial exploitation. Also, the idea was, as the project expanded to include more community members and more players who also could increase impact on cases of financial exploitation. As you all know, financial institutions report suspicious activities using SARS. But the SARS, our reporting function, this was really, this was an opportunity to take action. One of the interesting connections, or one of the interesting outcomes of COVID-19 is how much of the world moved to collaborating and working on virtually. And so in a weird way, given the fact it's called Helpful, yes, the name, God, I can't explain the name, but the concept became a concept for now. And what it means is that you have a secure environment for all the players who potentially could partner on the portal to be able to more effectively exchange information, more comfortably exchange information without worrying about issues of confidentiality, and therefore be able to design and or support better interventions on these kinds of cases. Next slide, please. And so right now, there's those two bullets about information security and standardization are sort of joined into, I think it's Sally just keeping me awake. Information security is how right now you have folks, financial institutions who are making referrals via unsecure methods. Fax, email, phone calls. Sometimes they're made through an APS intake portal, but the idea of standardizing the process, standardizing the kinds of information is captured, and standardizing routine collaboration on these cases is really one of the great benefits of Helpful. Also, the idea is that you will see is that once a financial institution is partnered on it, the representative of the financial institution can easily communicate with adult protective services. They will know when the case is referred. They will know the status of the referral, whether it's accepted or denied. And if it's accepted, they will also be able to know the status of the progress of the investigation and be able to download all of that communication at the financial institution want to take action. So no. Sorry.
I think somebody had their mic
There's
open.
nothing like a little Zoom bombing to keep me on my toes. Excellent. So it's like somebody just said no. Change management. So again, this is an interesting aspect of the implementation of any technology where there has not been a previous technology before, and so how we practice around financial exploitation. When there's a technological innovation like Helpful, really requires that you need to be able to sort of understand that there are going to be issues in terms of training people and orienting into the new way to work, the more efficient way to work. And hopefully with both the folks at financial institutions and the folks at APS or the state securities regulator, this Helpful makes everybody's work easier and more productive. Next slide, please. So Helpful is the innovative solution. So Sally, at this point, I think this is where you're going to take over and sort of talk about the next couple of slides.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about the slides. They have a mind of their own this morning for some reason.
That's okay.
But thanks, everybody. So yeah, we've been talking about Helpful, and I think everyone has pretty much a sense of what it is, but just to put a point on it, Helpful is essentially a website. It's an online, there you go, an online referral portal. So users who are a part of the Helpful project go to www.helpful.com and they have their own secure profile they can log into. So if you're an APS or a state regulator, you are logging on to receive referrals. If you are a part of the financial institutions partnered with us, you are logging on to send referrals. Most importantly, Helpful is a secure technology. So as Jeff was mentioning, typically faxes, emails, phone calls are used to make these kinds of referrals. With Helpful, we're trying to provide a secure environment for sensitive information, such as financial records, to be submitted. So that's probably one of the best things that we offer, in my opinion, in addition to that standardization piece. So we are a pilot project at the moment. We are currently piloting in 4 geographic locations, but the purpose of the project from the DOJ's perspective is to create something that's generalizable for national expansion. Again, we want to work towards standardizing these kinds of reports so that the reports are they're easier for people to make, and they're easier to retrieve and analyze. So as we look towards the future, we are looking at scaling up, and over the course of our project, we have added new locations, and we are in the process of adding more geographic locations. So that's another important piece of this project. And also multidisciplinary collaboration. So as you saw when Jeff was introducing our project partners, we have a cross-sector team. And I think that also reflects the multidisciplinary collaboration piece of Helpful itself. So we really want to create an environment where people can come together who are, people who are invested in the safety of older adults can come together and easily collaborate in a secure and safe environment. So I'm going to talk about evaluating the project. We are working with Dr. Jason Burnett and Elizabeth Lease at the University of Texas. Jason has created a evaluation plan for the project. I'm going to do my best to put it in layman's terms. If he were here, he would be able to go through the nuts and bolts of the evaluation, but I don't know if that would be super interesting. But just to get a sense of how we are, basically, we want to test if Helpful is doing the thing that we want it to do. So if you look at the first bullet point, feasibility, acceptability, and impact of the platform are what we want to measure. And it is a challenge. And I think Jason had to be a bit creative in creating our evaluation because, I think as Sarah was mentioning earlier, data collection practices across the country in different APS agencies are very different. So how do you measure the impact of something that's being implemented in different locations with different people who have diverging practices on how they address financial exploitation cases? So we have two ways that we're doing it. Anyone who has worked in human subjects research or survey administration knows that you can't burden our users with a ton of questionnaires. So we boiled it down to two. One is a user training post-test, and then we also have a user experience questionnaire. So at the beginning of the project, when we first launched, we did create 3 trainings. They're web-based trainings that are available on the portal for people who sign up, and they're optional. There was discussion among team members about whether or not the training should be optional. And we actually found out that, making the training mandatory might have deterred certain people from use of the portal. So I think that's interesting just as far as the importance of a cross-sector project team, since the culture of different types of organizations are so different. So there is an optional training that people can take, and then we have a post-test, which is also optional. And the purpose of the post-test is to just see if people are confident in using Helpful once they've gone through the training. And we're going to measure that by making sure that 80% of end users do have that confidence. And if we meet that 80% mark, then we will know our training was successful. The other question is, do we need a training? People are becoming more and more used to using new technology without any sort of training. So again, it's not mandatory to do the training. So we're going to measure how many people actually use the training versus how many people are using the portal. And if we find that most people didn't do the training and they were able to use the portal anyway, we may not need to have trainings in the future. So that's a part of this improvement process we're engaging in. The second part of the evaluation is this user experience questionnaire. So I think this is pretty interesting because we are asking users what they think of Helpful, and we're going to use their responses to evaluate the feasibility, acceptability, and impact of the platform. So the questionnaire that Jason put together adopts something called the Health ITUES, which is actually used in healthcare settings to evaluate the user experience of new technology. So in a healthcare system where a new technology is implemented on a wide scale, you can ask users basically, how's this going for you? And it's a validated measure, so it's accepted in the scientific community. There are 4 domains to this questionnaire: quality of work, perceived usefulness of the product, perceived ease of use, and user control of the product. So yeah, we're asking our Helpful users, is this actually a worthwhile thing for you to be engaging in? That is really beneficial for us to understand the success of when we do scale up to more locations. What can we do to make sure that people are ready and excited to use this platform? We're also collecting some demographics from these user experience questionnaires. And we're going to use this to, and we're also asking basically, have you sent and received a case? So also frequency of use is being measured. And at the end of the pilot, Jason will take all of this data, and we'll be able to produce a report that not only helps us understand what exactly happened during our pilot, but we're hoping to contribute to elder abuse research. And as you may know, elder abuse research is not funded very often. So we want to do what we can to contribute to this space of elder abuse, new technology, and how we can protect older adults. And I'm going to hand it off to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Sally. So the past, present, and future, which so funny is that I think when we think about things like that, the past, present, and future, I think I want to talk about the future in North Carolina more particularly. So Sally, could you skip down to the current flow chart, please? Good. So this gives you, so I want to make something clear. the financial institutions have to be invited on. So it's not like somebody can sort of just go to the portal and sign up like it's Amazon. It's, you know, you've got to be invited on, and then there are user agreements that the financial institutions, and one of our great challenges is to get commercial financial institutions, which I think we're onto the platform, where the larger commercial financial institutions who are more concerned about the risk, appropriately concerned about the risk of confidentiality with their customers. And so one of our strong efforts in the last, I would say the last year or so, is to invite and trying to connect with large commercial financial institutions. And Liz Lowy and her partner at EverSafe, Howard Tischler, have been taking the lead in engaging with these larger financial institutions on the commercial side. So we're talking about savings and checking, and where a lot of the financial exploitation can go on of vulnerable adults. So as you can see from the flow is the financial institution, once they've identified or suspect financial exploitation, they have, in North Carolina, they have the opportunity to either send a referral to the state securities regulator and or to Adult Protective Services. And then Adult Protective Services will give, do their usual eligibility assessment and determine whether or not there's grounds for them to open an investigation. Either way, all of that information is made available can be made available, to the financial institution. And then the financial institution has the option of downloading the case history, if you will, that has gone on the platform. The other thing the other aspect, which is really, I think, very helpful, particularly for Adult Protective Services frontline workers, is that on the platform, when they receive financial records from financial institutions, and they can usually be, kind of like very difficult or complex to understand. There is on the platform, you can request a forensic analysis of the documentation, and the platform can provide that. And so that helps the workload and helps to red flag those instances which would indicate financial exploitation or indicate the possibility of financial exploitation. And so from Adult Protective Services so I see that it's so interesting and the funny thing about a chat in a Zoom is that all of a sudden it'll just pop up and you're like, that would never happen if we were in person. And so all 100 counties are in fact on the platform, which was a question that popped up in the chat. So the idea then is to expand as much as possible helpful. And so Sally, can we go to the next slide? I believe it's the next slide where it talks about what the expansion. So right now, as you can see, it's significantly expanded, both in terms of collaborators as well as the ability for current to be able to collaborate on the platform. So you can see now that we are in the process of inviting on the United States Postal Inspection System. So any referral that has a nexus to the mail, we could immediately send to them. They have all these databases that they have access to that can help. They can help to inform more information that would help the investigation with Adult Protective Services. And on top of that, the USPAS also does its own investigations as well. And the North Carolina Conference of District Attorneys is also coming on, so that the district attorneys will have the ability to communicate with Adult Protective Services and potentially, I think sometime in the future, very soon, directly with the financial institutions after they made a referrals. But that's sort of like a third step. But right now we'll have, so as you can see from the two different flows, we have significantly increased the potential impact of the portal in North Carolina. The other thing that I did not mention, because it's early in the morning, I'm sitting in my dining room and wondering how is this all happening, but is that this portal is also being piloted in San Francisco and San Francisco County, Montana, and Missouri. And we're looking at a couple of other places that who have expressed strong interest. Florida and Pennsylvania. So it's expanding, but I would emphasize that we really are working very hard to both get on APS systems as well as commercial financial institutions. So that's really the current, as you can see, those two flows reflect the present and the future. I noticed, I will go to the chat because I noticed a couple of questions popped up.
We had a couple of questions, Jeff. One, earlier in the chat, there was a question asking if this is just for APS or can law enforcement use it as well. And I said that you would touch on this, and it's where we hope.
I never said that. I've not been here. So I would say to you, we would like to have the discussion to how that would work. Obviously, with criminal justice coming on through the DAs, yes. So it's a very hesitant yes, because we would want to see how that would work. If we're talking about a statewide agency or we're talking about a countywide agency, that would require some discussion to figure out. We would definitely not want to close the door to that because, again, with any agency that's involved in this work, we want to give them the opportunity to be able to partner on helpful.
Yeah. And another couple of questions asking the same thing, basically the time frame of the pilot. I know there was an initial period and then
right. So the time frame of the pilot is, so this, I'm hoping to get out my little violin here and say how sad this is because the pilot is scheduled to end in September and we're working like crazy to expand it. We have in consideration a couple of grant opportunities that we are pursuing. We're also sort of trying to figure out other ways that the pilot can no longer be a pilot, but become a standard practice in all of the sites that it's currently located. So the reason why I have very little hair is because I wake up in the middle of the night thinking it's now May and I have to, we have to figure out a way of sustaining this. So, we invite anybody who has won the lotto or has large sums of money hidden in their head and wants to fund this particular project or has ideas on how to do that, we certainly welcome that.
Yeah. And I think it's important to understand. I mean, I get excited when I talk about helpful. I hope that enthusiasm sort of comes through in all the times that I've mentioned during the partnership meetings in the past, whenever I've given updates on this. I truly think that helpful it can be a game changer in this whole effort to help our vulnerable adults by allowing all this communication and hopefully some sort of coordination of effort. I really think that it can be a very powerful tool, and I'm glad to say, and I think we in North Carolina are sort of leading the way.
Yes.
In some ways. I mean,
yes.
I think some of the expansion ideas came out of some of the discussions that we've had as we've been going through this, and
yes.
I'm really pleased that the Conference of District Attorneys is interested in this. Nancy Warren had a question in the chat about the North Carolina Banking Commission and if the credit unions are on board. I know that you guys had some discussion, trying to get some of the financial institutions on board. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Nancy, this is more of a movement than it is a project. So if you have a way of facilitating a connection with those two different organizations, it would be, we are more than happy to, I hesitate in using the word helpful because every time I use it, it really creeps me out. But the bottom line is that we've approached a couple of credit unions, but not the credit union organization, and certainly not the North Carolina Banking Association, which you might be thinking to yourself, that would be something logical. Why wouldn't they think of that? Well, hey. But yes, I think we will note that and see if we can facilitate. And if you have any ideas or context in that direction, and you're willing to share it, we're more than happy to send you some chocolate or a reward of in kind.
And I think we did have some reach out to some of these institutions. you know, there's there's always going to be a little bit of a learning curve here, and a lot of institutions feel like they may already have some system in place,
Right.
and so there's a little bit of institutional inertia at sometimes, but
Right.
we've do you have a ballpark number of the number of financial institutions already sort of committed to this in North Carolina?
23.
23.
In North
Most of them are
Carolina, I
broken.
don't know. I know 23 total. I don't know if all 23 operate in North Carolina.
Right. But again, recognizing that this is a pilot, and so we want to have enough institutions and enough APS offices involved in order to get hopefully some measurable data
Right.
to show proof of concept,
Right.
so that we can then expand it further along the lines that we're looking at. There was a question asking, do we go to helpful.com to get updates on this pilot? I'd love to stay updated on this wonderful opportunity.
Oh, I saw that. The idea that, that's the future of Helpful, where you can receive, we can send you texts or email bursts about the current state of the march for world domination by Helpful. I think the best way right now is for us to think about how we would give a state. It would not be in other words, I don't want to call it a newsletter because that makes me sound as old as I am, but I think if we have some sort of informational to give a sense of what the status is. But right now you can't go to Helpful for an update because it's really it's a secure platform for people.
What about the Hunter, your website at Hunter?
Yeah, I think that's where I was thinking about putting it, and then of course I could shamelessly draw people into our new website. So
yeah, why don't you put maybe Sally? Can you put the web address there in the chat?
Well, Sally, we don't have actually we do. We have a place. Yes, sorry, we can put that. Do you know it, Sally?
The Brookdale site or
no,
the
God, no.
the New
I mean,
Silverman?
well, yes, what Dale site, and then or this isn't that Silverman our temporary website. So the reason why we're having this really awkward discussion in front of 100 and some people is because my department, Sally and I, we all moved into the School of Social Work from the research center. So it's a bigger canvas and we have a lot more opportunities, but it also means that we have to build a website. And I think there's a temporary website that's up. But why don't you show everybody
I'm not able to do that without exiting the
okay. So
deck.
So for the time being, if you want more information, email Sally or me. Sally, just go down to the last slide where yeah, perfect.
Right.
And then we're working quite furiously to build a website, and it will include a special place for Helpful. So please bear with us. This happened very recently.
I would like to encourage those APS offices that are using Helpful. I'm seeing some in the chat. A couple of you have already mentioned using it, but I would encourage you all to put your name and your APS office in the chat so that we can collect that and have that. And if you're not using it or need more training, Sarah Smith, do you want to join us again? There you go.
Sure.
How can we get these people hooked up with some training besides contacting me or Ann Elmore?
Absolutely. I know Laura Gorganis was our point person for Helpful when we first got on the platform. But for those county DSSs, for those supervisors, I see a lot of familiar names in the chat. If you just want to send me an email, sarah.smith@dhhs.nc.gov. Or if you want to reach out to the listserv and mention, hey, Sarah, I would like some more information on Helpful, I will be more than happy to try and get you connected where you need to be to get that training. Because I know there was some training available, like Sally had mentioned earlier, but I'll be more than happy to try and get those to get you guys connected. I know just as far as um, county DSS training is concerned, right now we're actually working on our training calendar for the next state fiscal year, this upcoming state fiscal year. So be on the lookout for that. All the counties, please be on the lookout for that. Hopefully, we'll have that one out in the next month. And I know we'll have lots of financial exploitation training that we've got scheduled. And graciously working with us virtually. Hopefully, we'll be able to have some live in person this state fiscal year. I'm not sure when, but fingers crossed it'll be soon. But yeah, we'll have that out. So we'll have that financial exploitation training. And there will be mention of Helpful in that training as well. So, like I said, if you do need some, or if you aren't sure if your county, if you're a social worker and aren't sure if your county is involved with Helpful, or if you're a supervisor and maybe want some additional training, like I said, please email me. Most of you know my email. If you don't, email our DAS listserv, and I have access to that, and just let me know, what we can do to help facilitate that.
Yeah.
I know at the division, we're super excited about Helpful. Um, this seems like if it almost feels, and Jeff may concur, it almost feels like, we're kind of slowly building up, but we're really excited because we know financial exploitation is an issue in North Carolina. I think it's probably, actually, I know it's a silent issue in North Carolina. We just don't hear enough.
Mhm.
We don't hear enough about it because
Mhm.
it's almost like folks are embarrassed or they're
Right.
ashamed, or they don't want to bring this attention to a family member that may be helping them out. But yeah, we're really, really excited about the good that this platform can do in helping our counties fight financial exploitation.
And Sarah, we are incredibly happy to be, we really take a lot from the collaboration we have in North Carolina.
Mhm.
Everybody's thinking we say that at every conference that we say wherever we go, but I happen to remember when we pitched the idea to Sarah, and Sarah said, yeah, I think it's a good idea. And I would need to sort of talk endlessly the benefits and the technology. She said, yes. And I sort of like paused for like, wait, I have all this stuff. And then she said, no, I need to talk to my division director. I was like, okay, if everything was going to be this easy. And, John and Sarah and Laura and Ann and Bill all have been incredibly supportive of this project. I'm hoping that people from the other locations are listening and going, but what about me? Yeah, what about you? So, I think we were very excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about this project. We are certainly working furiously to ensure that it is going to become a standard practice in North Carolina. And I really can't tell you how much I appreciate, and I'm sure Sally appreciates, how much the opportunity to talk to you about it today.
Well, thank you, guys. I think we're just about at the end of our time here. I too want to just say thanks to everybody. I'm excited about this project. To some, it may seem like this is a little inside baseball because it's really a public thing. The victims don't necessarily know that there's this going on behind, but we wanted to give you all an idea and an understanding that there is an effort to try to help with collaboration and coordination and communication so that we can see some of the perpetrators given the justice they deserve. Okay, so we have now been pulled back into the main thing. Kevin is giving me the big hook. I said time to shut up, so I am going to do it. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your conference.
John, I would never tell you to shut up, but I want to thank all of you. It'd be great presentation. First of all, I think one of the things, hopefully next year, we maybe should be able to do a breakout session so that you guys can give an update of, maybe where you're growing in the next year, of where you come from since today's presentation.
We'd be
Because I
happy
can see
to.
more folks getting involved thanks to this great presentation today. And hopefully we can connect you guys with Peter Gwaltney, with the folks from the CNAC, with our State Employees Credit Union folks, to maybe help bring on those credit unions to this great venture. I think it would be remarkable. I saw someone ask the question about having law enforcement involved where they can do it. So I think it would be a great aspect. I think you guys have got a great start on a wonderful project that could just grow to lots of different ways for help law enforcement and to help the victims out there, that we can, try to help save their monies. And I'm like Nancy, I think it would be great that financial institutions would want to be involved to help their members keep the money in their banks. So thank you all for that wonderful presentation. I know we're getting ready to go to break. I know we want to, and then we're going to be moving to the breakout rooms. Just want to give some folks that reminders that when you do come back from your break, you should see a pop-up box at the bottom of your screen to join your breakout room. And remember, we are assigning you to the breakout room that you originally registered for today's session. We got 3 wonderful breakout sessions in the morning time and then the afternoon. But just remember, when you come back to break, you got to hit the join button to go into your breakout room. If you actually get put in your incorrect room, just know you can always leave that room, come back to the main room. Allison and I will be staying in the main room the entire time so that we can help you get into your breakout session. So we hope you enjoy your breakout sessions. I know that you have the folks that are the shepherds or the monitors for the rooms in your breakouts, and I know your speakers are going to be wonderful. It was a great start to Wednesday already with this wonderful presentation. So thank you guys very much. Enjoy your break. We're going to have some slides playing during the break, but then when you come back, click on your meeting room button to join. At this time, folks, you should be seeing your join button on your screen. We'll have slides up and going during the lunch break. So if you need to turn down your speakers since there'll be some music, or you can sit and eat lunch to the music if you'd like to. We appreciate that. But just know that at 1 o'clock when you come back from lunch, you will have a join button for your afternoon breakout session. And you'll need to click the join button to take you into your afternoon session. So again, just a reminder as everybody continues to come back in, we are going to the lunch break. Make sure that if you don't want to hear the music and the slides, we're going to be having slides going during the lunch break that has music. So you may want to turn down your speakers just a little bit, and you may have to turn them back up later on when you get back in at 1 o'clock. Remember, at 1 o'clock, starting around 5 till 1, you should see the join message on your screen that will take you to your afternoon breakout session. Then you can raise your speakers back up, but remember, you have to hit the join button to actually take you to those breakout sessions. Okay, we're going to start the breakout slides for the lunch session, so please enjoy the music. Well, welcome back, everyone, to our afternoon session. I know we're about to wind it down. You see, I've already taken my jacket off for the day. I'm trying to gear up for the Hurricanes game tonight because those of you that really know me know that I'm a diehard Carolina Tar Heels fan. So normally I don't wear red, but unless it's for the Hurricanes. So I know we want to get started quickly with our session. I just want to remind you that after this next session, we will have some closing remarks. And then we will actually have the annual business meeting for our conference and wind it down and talk about what's to come for the rest of the year for us. So Meredith, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our speakers.
Yes, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Smith. I'm with the UNC School of Government. I just wanted to first start out and say thank you to the partnership for putting together an incredible conference. This has been just a lot of fun to be a participant and be able to jump in and out of all of these various sessions. It has been an incredible feat that you guys have pulled this off, but you really did an amazing job. And I, for one, am so grateful for all the content and all the work that I know went into pulling all the sessions together for this during a pandemic over Zoom with breakout rooms. You guys have just done a tremendous job, so thank you. This is the last session, I believe the last substantive session of the conference. I am here today in a purely supportive role. The two stars that will be speaking, you can see in another box on the screen. Abby Adams and Paula Kohut are with the law firm of Adams and Kohut and Adams, excuse me, in Wilmington, North Carolina. They are estate planning and elder law gurus, and I'm excited about this session. I have sort of been a participant in the planning, but they will be delivering it today. I'm going to be here supporting them in providing, monitoring the chat box and helping facilitate some of the discussion. So if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. I think we all want to make sure that this is a conversation and that you all get your questions answered as you go. You will see as part of the agenda, there was an additional participant, additional presenter who was going to join us today, but unfortunately for health reasons, Chevelle Mavens is not able to be here today. We were sad to lose her as a partner in this presentation because she has such a wealth of knowledge, both through her work with the County Department of Social Services in Chatham County and also with Addiction Prevention Specialists, organization, a group that she has founded. So we are sad that Chevelle can't be here today and wish her the best. But I will turn it over to Paula and Abby. Thank you so much. And let's get started.
Thank you.
Thanks, Meredith. My name is Paula Kohut, and this is my law partner, Abby Adams. And so what we're going to, when we were talking with the planning committee, I had mentioned that even my dad, who was a retired surgeon and had a lot of available resources, even he became a potential victim of financial exploitation. And so we thought we'd go through both my dad's case and 3 other case studies and kind of talk about soft tools. And that is the tools that you can use in civil proceedings that are short of a guardianship. And also when we did use either definitive guardianship or filed a superior court action. So we're going to start off with my dad, and in my dad's case, and that's a picture of my dad and myself, and in my dad's case, why don't we go to the next slide, Abby?
Here we go. No, I got it.
Okay.
All right. Sorry,
And
PowerPoint beginners.
So my dad, as we called him Dr. Bob, he was a heavy drinker, heavy smoker, and he was a widower. And those, we'll talk a little bit about how those factors put him at risk, but again, began making unusual investments. He always liked to engage in, invest in some high risk investments, but as he got into his 70s, he started making some very poor decisions. And Heather Goldstein had mentioned yesterday in her presentation, Alt in the Name of the Law, the concepts of fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. And so my dad, he had managed a department at a medical school. So he had a lot of fluid intelligence, problem solving was what he did for a living. But then after he retired, that started slipping away. And also that crystallized intelligence that Heather was talking about, applying past experience to problem solving, that started slipping too in his 70s. And one thing he invested in that was kind of a red flag was Iraqi dinar. And the idea with Iraqi dinar, if you're not aware of what that scam was, the promoters of the Iraqi dinar scam would tell the individuals that when Iraq invaded Kuwait back in the first Iraq war, and the US pushed Iraq out, the Iraqi dinar went way down. And then when they're pushed out and the region was stabilized, it went up, the Iraqi dinar went up exponentially in comparison to the dollar. So the thought was that my dad, at the end of the second Iraq war, that if he invested $7,000, he was going to make approximately $20 million. And here was my dad who had run a department at a medical university, and he believed that investment just might happen. And so that was one red flag that he might need some help. And then Heather had also mentioned the tips that she kind of provides people, and that is to make sure you're not isolated. My dad was out on, he had bought a timber farm in which he retired on, and so he is isolated. He is also, as I mentioned, a heavy drinker, so that's somewhat isolated from friends and family. And once we got wind that he might be making some poor investments and that something was up, what I did was I called all my brothers. I have 3 brothers, and we made sure that we were present out there with him. And so what had happened was my dad, I went out, I'd always handled his estate planning. So he had done all the right things. When he retired, he would send me copies of his financial statements from his financial advisor and bank. And I would just put those in a notebook. And he was also, we would meet quarterly. But I went out to his farm one weekend, and he mentioned that he had a companion, and she had helped him out. He was recovering from surgery, so he had some physical limitations. And he mentioned that he felt he needed to start turning some things over to her. And that kind of raised concerns on my part. And I went back and I looked at his records, and I saw that there's a lot of unusual transactions. And so I went out, got a hold of all his records online. And in the meantime, in the background, I knew that my dad would do really well in a hearing if we had filed a guardianship to try to get control of his assets. He would have performed really well before the clerk, and it would be unlikely that we would be able to appoint a guardian. And yet he was making poor decisions. But we did have a lawyer on standby just in case we needed to file that guardianship. And ultimately, I ended up getting him to move down to Wilmington and introduced a caregiving team of caregivers. And we were able to secure all his financial assets and put him in a real comfortable situation. And we're going to talk, I don't want to take up Abby's time. We're going to talk about some of the specifics on how we handle that situation, but we wanted to give you an overview of these 4 case studies. So Abby, why don't you tell us about Fred?
Okay. So Fred was one of my favorite clients. This kind of reminds me of him, but he was also a heavy drinker and smoker. He was also a widower, and we'll talk in the later slides about how those 2 factors can put people at a heightened risk for exploitation. In Fred's case, he was married for a long time and trusted his wife to handle all of the financial affairs. And then his wife passed away suddenly, and he just transferred all of that to a child who he entrusted. He never really paid attention to his assets, but over the course of his life, he'd accumulated a nice estate. And his child took him in and said, I'll take care of you. I know you're sad about mom. Why don't you come and we'll help you here, which is also a common theme. It usually oftentimes starts out by someone trying to do the right thing or helping after either an illness or some event. And then slowly but surely they start exploiting the individual. And so in this case, the child started taking money from Fred and just continued until eventually, when we got involved, Fred really had nothing left. And so in Fred's case, his one child in particular was the main exploiter, but what we realized in the course of representing him is that all of his children had exploited him or taken what they could from him over the past few years. And he met a woman who became his companion, and she assisted him in looking into his financial records and seeing what was going on, and also helped him get to legal aid so that he could talk to an attorney to see if there was anything that we could do. And so one common theme that we're also presented with as private attorneys in private practice who have clients come to us with after they've been exploited or because they're afraid that there's been exploitation, is that the exploiter has taken the money and it's gone. It's spent at stores. It's cash that just is gone. But in Fred's case, the exploiter, I guess, fortunately for Fred, had invested Fred's funds in real estate and various business interests. And so we spent a lot of time reviewing his records and finding out what was going on. We'll talk a little bit later about how it's very common also for exploiters to kind of mix everything up to make things a little more difficult to figure out what's going on. But we, in Fred's case, we actually did file a lawsuit to recover the assets that his child had taken from him. And it was a long process. It took probably a year or two, but we were able to get most of his assets back for him. There was an expense connected with that. We, we're very upfront with Fred about that it would be an expensive process, but in Fred's case, it did make sense because we felt comfortable that we were going to be able to recover it for him. But the other issue or the other thing that came up in Fred's case is that it's not always easy to know, especially at first glance, who the good person is and who the exploiter is. In this case, most people would typically think that children of the individual would care for the parent, and this younger companion who seems to have appeared overnight is probably the one exploiting, but that was actually the opposite of what was going on. And we even had our concerns when Fred first came to us about this companion, but over the course of getting to know Fred, she really proved time and time again that she cared for him and that she wanted to help him, and she did. She provided great help to him.
And I think, Abby, one of the issues that was in Fred's case was that's so common is when someone's exploited, if they don't have the resources anymore, then civil remedies or a private lawyer can be very expensive. And that was Fred's companion was able to help him marshal the few assets that he had left. And we kept on a schedule, a litigation budget, so that we could file the recovery actions and do it as effectively as we could. We associated a trial lawyer who brought an action in Superior Court. Abby will generally appear in contested matters before the clerk of court, but when it goes up for a civil trial, typically we would associate a trial lawyer to handle that. And ultimately, we were able to recover in excess of $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that proved to be well. But then, Abby, why don't you talk about the guardianship that was filed after?
Right. So another point that we wanted to talk about during this presentation is the right of self-determination. And unfortunately, Chevelle had a lot of good information that she could have added about this, but from our end, clients do have a right to make bad decisions or decisions that their family may not agree with, as long as the person is competent and not a danger to himself or to others. And so in this case, the children obviously were very upset that he chose to spend time with his companion, and more so that the companion was causing a lot of problems in their cash flow because she'd effectively cut it off. And so they did the children made reports to Adult Protective Services, who thoroughly investigated the matter. They made reports to law enforcement, who investigated. I think at some points, professionals were visiting them every day to make sure that everything was okay. And at every step of the way, the people who were meeting with Fred were comfortable that he was safe and that he knew what he was doing. He was able to make his own decisions, and that this is a decision he was making. Ultimately, the children did file an incompetency proceeding to obtain guardianship over Fred. And that's a common issue that we see a lot with clients, is that they come to our office and say, we've got to file a guardianship. Something has happened. We need to go to court. And we usually kind of talk with them and backstep to see if there's a better solution, because oftentimes there is. And it really kind of backfired for Fred's kids, because they filed a guardianship. And then the court found, just like the other agencies who had interviewed Fred that he was competent and able to make his own decisions. And so he was declared competent. And so that was, we were happy to be able to help Fred in that case. And then another case study is Alice. And Alice lived in Virginia for most of her life. She was divorced, and she retired and started slipping a little bit. She was eventually diagnosed with early onset dementia. And so she moved to North Carolina to be near her only child. And so we'll talk a little bit later about one of the simple things that you can do to help prevent exploitation is to just have a good network, either of friends or family or trusted professional advisors, but people who are looking out for you. And so she left that network to move near her only child. And before we knew it, the child was taking pretty much all of Alice's money and using her accounts as her own. And it was actually Alice's banker who discovered the exploitation and realized there were significant withdrawals and spending patterns that were way out of how Alice typically spent. And she actually alerted other family members who got involved and engaged an attorney who came to our office. And so luckily for Alice, she did have a power of attorney. She had signed that. Unfortunately, she named her daughter as one of her agents, which is another common theme that we see. Not everyone has someone good that they can name or that they can trust to handle these things. And it's often a child or someone who should be helpful, who ends up exploiting. But the power of attorney actually named Alice's daughter and Alice's sister. And so when the banker discovered the exploitation, she reached out to the sister. And similarly, the banker and the sister said, we've got to do a guardianship. We've got to report this to the police. And we talked with them and said, well, let's focus on what we can do first. Okay, the sister is going to take over and start acting. She's kind of taken a back role to the daughter. So we closed Alice's current accounts. We opened new accounts for Alice so that the daughter didn't have any information or access to those. I met with the daughter. We reached out to her and she agreed to resign as agent. And so that was really helpful because we didn't have to file any lawsuits. Alice really didn't have to spend much money for the daughter to resign. And then the sister took over. And that's what's happening now. The sister is in full control and is making sure that Alice is taken care of. And so the first step for Alice was just that we needed to stop the exploitation.
And wasn't there a criminal proceeding that was brought?
There was. The daughter was ultimately charged with financial exploitation. We had talked with the sister about that and about the risks of that. But she was charged, and it relied on when the police were alerted and did their investigation. They looked at Alice's power of attorney, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but the importance of looking and really reading every power of attorney because each one is different. And the power of attorney did not allow any gifts. So even though Alice's daughter was authorized to act for her, she was not able to spend the money on herself.
Was there any money left?
Unfortunately, no. And in Alice's case, the money was gone.
So now we have a restitution order, and one of the unintended consequences that I don't know that Alice or her, because she told the investigators that she wanted to prosecute her daughter. But I don't think that they fully comprehended the fact that the daughter now would have a criminal record, and also this restitution order, while it's out there, the daughter is underemployed and nothing's been paid on it. So it's very, the criminal process did provide some punitive remedy, but it really didn't put Alice back where she needed to be, and that was for Alice to come back why don't
Yeah.
we talk about the next case and then we'll.
Well, and just overall,
I was
these
going to say we have we have just a comment
Sure.
in the chat noting how loaded these situations are with family dynamics and how adult children may feel harmed or disappointed by their heavy drinking dad's lifestyle as children, and they can be using his money and assets as a way of compensation for that. And there's sort of that justification going on for the behavior that the child may be perpetrating against.
Exactly, and I think that's what a little later in the presentation we're going to talk about that, and especially as far as alcohol and substance abuse, how that can factor in.
Yeah, another person wrote one issue is the child committing the exploitation is the sole heir, and so they feel entitled to the money they're going to get it anyway, so they're justifying the reasons why why they can go ahead and take it.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of justification like that. In a slide later, we do just point out that no one has no one's obligated to leave anybody anything. So even in Alice's case, her daughter would have been her sole heir. The problem, though, is that Alice now needs memory care and is unable to afford it, and is at a real risk of having to find different housing that may not be what she could have had if her daughter hadn't exploited her. So, but just these cases are very difficult.
And great. And then the next slide is Sam. So Sam, her parents left her. Sam was a stroke victim when I met her. Her parents left her a substantial inheritance, but her husband, he became POA, and he had alcohol and substance abuse problems, and he had gambling most of her inheritance away. So it's very sad. And then upon the husband's death is when we really learned about all this exploitation by the husband. The only family member who was there to be able to support Sam, and Sam had a special needs child as well, who had some mental health issues, and was not able to seek employment, but still could do things like help in the kitchen and do a little shopping. But the cousin was the only family member who was there helping the family once the husband died. And I met with Sam, I met with the cousin, and Sam is able to communicate. It's difficult to understand, but it's taken me a while. But in light of her stroke, she has some limitations there, but she clearly is competent. And so I did draft a power of attorney appointing the cousin, but I put a provision in the power of attorney, which we often do in situations like this, that because there's no other trusted person. I typically don't like to add myself, but I like to give some third party the power to request an accounting. Heather had mentioned in her presentation, in the name of the law yesterday, that the clerk of court can require an accounting from an attorney, in fact, from someone serving under a power of attorney, but it's much more effective if a private person can do that. And when I asked for that accounting, that's when the cousin came forward and said that she had taken some money. And so in this case, and Heather, in Heather's presentation, she also mentioned how important it is to have friends and networks out in the community. In this case, Sam's church members, her fellow church members, were the ones that flagged the issue for me. They called me up and said, Sam wanted to call. She's not sure she hasn't seen her financial statements in a while, and she wants to understand what's going on. And so that's when I reached out and requested the accounting. In this case, I could have filed a guardianship. The friends from church, or even myself, could have notified law enforcement. The cousin was the only person who was providing the care for Sam, and actually doing a good job of that. And as we'll talk about later, the cousin wasn't receiving any respite care, and she was balancing her family, Sam, and we ended up telling the cousin to get separate counsel, and we negotiated a settlement agreement, and where she would repay over time. And she had a good job. She was actually in an accounting department. So had there been a criminal prosecution, her ability to pay would have potentially gone away. But we've gotten back most of the money. We still have a little bit left. And now the finances are they're actually, I'm serving as trustee. It's more or less a pro bono case at this point, but and that's another thing that we'll talk about later on, trusteeships and when they're appropriate and when they're not, and who's an appropriate trustee. But so we were able to safeguard the money, and through that settlement agreement, we were able to avoid the legal expense of a guardianship proceeding, and we were able to get most of the money back. And so those are kind of the 4 case studies. And then we wanted to talk about what puts people at risk and how we might prevent it. And interestingly, when we were, after Abby and I prepared the initial slide presentation with Chevelle, and we started looking on the internet, there's a website on rethinking guardianship. And basically all the things we've learned through our practice are set forth on that same website. And even when we listened to Heather's presentation yesterday, this is all, Abby and I sometimes refer to it, they're reruns. These fact patterns just keep repeating themselves. It's the family member, the companion, it's just trying to figure out who's doing the exploiting and how best and most efficiently to stop it. But one issue is financial independence. And Heather mentioned when her clients, when they're reaching retirement age, she mentions how they need these trusted advisors or this trusted network. And in my dad's case, he was used to running everything. And what saved him from losing all of his assets was the fact that he had a child who was an attorney, and he met with me regularly, and I knew what his assets were. And he sent me copies of those documents. So when I went out to his farm and he told me he was getting ready to place trust in a person I felt was not qualified, I was able to go back and see, and here was someone who had always methodically handled his investments and his banking, and now there are all these transfers going back and forth. It was just erratic transfers and erratic payments, drawdowns on a home equity line of credit. And Abby, I think in Fred's case, he delegated everything his whole life.
Yeah, so Fred was not financially independent. He actually depended on his family to handle the financial matters for his whole life. But the problem, I think he probably could trust his wife to not exploit him. But then upon her death, there were no external checks and balances. One child handled everything. Honestly, in Fred's case, I don't know if it would have been even any better if all 3 of his children shared in that responsibility. But he didn't have an accountant or a lawyer or church members or anyone else kind of looking out for him. And, like Paula mentioned or is going to mention, I think his heavy drinking and smoking, may have played a part in that.
And so the other factors is in my dad's case, is a widower. My mother died when she was relatively young, and he was divorced from my stepmother. So he was lonely in his retirement, and that led to a series of companions. And that's another tension in his, I think some of the comments, Meredith, earlier. There's quite often tension between a parent's companion, if they're a widower or divorced, and the children by a prior marriage. And it's trying to sort that out. Is this just family conflict, or is this exploitation? That it's just it's a little bit of a process. But then the risky drinking, a heavy drinker, they place themselves at risk because they're going to be more isolated from friends and family, and they're going to make their decision making is not going to be quite what it could be.
Well, I think another common issue, such as with Alice, I think ideally, if Alice was our longtime client, we would have been meeting with her regularly and talking to her about the importance of, probably about the time when she retired, of really having trusted people around her. She did do the right thing, luckily, of having a power of attorney. A lot of people don't. And so that's one way we can avoid a guardianship, but also naming her sister and her daughter so that there were some checks and balances. But then what we see often is that when people might start losing capacity, it's hard to admit, they might not notice it, but also even clients who, have fell victim to one of the scams, they're very embarrassed and they don't want to talk about it. And so that can also put themselves at even greater risk for exploitation.
And like with my father, that Iraqi dinar scam, I could have been very, I wanted to respect his own independence and autonomy with that. I thought it was a very poor investment. I knew it was a scam, but I felt, well, he invested, he didn't put himself financially at risk with the amount that he invested. And so I wasn't going to challenge that because, as we'll talk about later, his judgment was at stake. So if I challenged him too much, I was going to drive him away. And then as far as risky habits, alcohol, substance abuse, and gambling, those can all place a client at risk. While not in our case study, as we were preparing for this, we had a client who drank, and when he drank in the evenings, he would black out. And his children were convinced that his caregiver was physically pushing him down because they described a father who was fearless. And then in front of this caregiver, he seemed to be very submissive, and they could never understand what was going on. And there are a few instances where the families thought that pointed to, it was when he was in a blackout that he would be pushed down, and then he had kind of that subconscious memory of that. And that was the families thought about that. But
yeah, well, and we usually do see the people who have some money to either pay an attorney, or they've at least come to us. But even if you don't come to an attorney, Paula, in your dad's case, didn't his physician also help with that?
My dad's physician helped in a way that many physicians who might not have that close a relationship would have missed the opportunity. And there, his companion, who we felt was trying to, and we'll talk about some of more of the details a little bit later, but we felt she was trying to regain control because he had moved down to Wilmington. I was arranging for all his caregiving. He had 24-hour caregivers. He was very fortunate. He had a long-term disability policy. And I was also handling all his financial affairs. And I started showing up to the meetings with him when he had healthcare appointments. And there was a little bit of a tug of war between me and his companion. And the doctor was really helpful and explained to his companion that I was his healthcare agent, and that that she was going to, I was going to be included in those meetings, so that the doctor kind of intervened in that case, and it was very helpful. But she knew me, she knew my father, and that was just that proved to be very helpful. What we wanted, Chevelle had a few slides on addiction, and actually there's a lot of substance abuse and alcoholism in my family. I've been in recovery for over 30 years. So I know a lot anecdotally. What I don't have is the professional experience that Chevelle would have been able to bring to the presentation. But on the next slide, the one thing that Chevelle had mentioned as we were having conversations about this presentation is there's often this idea that, well, maybe someone is just they're older, there's no need to try to deal with an alcohol or substance abuse problem, typically prescription medication. But actually, alcoholism, it's not bad behavior. Bad behavior is the symptom of a disease. And if you kind of look at it as a disease in the disease model, in my dad's case, towards the end of his life, or his last couple of years of life, one night he had gotten out of bed by himself. And I think part of it was he had had a little bit too much to drink that night. He fell and he ended up in the hospital, and they ended up putting him on anticonvulsive medicine. And that's when we introduced, I brought down a addiction doctor to kind of do an intervention with him, because he could not drink on that medicine, but that medicine, the prescription was getting ready to run out, and he was anxious to start drinking again, but he didn't have the physical ability to be able to handle it anymore. And so when we brought that, we tried to do an intervention, but he was still determined. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to still drink. And but the interventionist, the addiction doctor, had a great idea, and that was to reach out to his physician and mention that the anticonvulsive medicine was not going to hurt him. And if the doctor kept him on it, then he could not drink. And so we kind of use that as a substitute for, I know some folks will use antabuse, but it was a way to take the alcohol out of the equation for the last year or so of his life, which relieved a lot of stress on the part of the caregivers, and it provided with them a safe environment. And that was kind of a creative solution that this addiction specialist came up with. And then there's
yeah, well, and when we were preparing for this conversation or for this presentation, Chevelle had a great example that I hadn't heard before, in that with when we were talking about how a lot of times people say, well, they're old, just let them do what they want. But if you had a family member who was a diabetic and you saw them buy a dozen donuts and come home and eat it and go into a diabetic coma, you would be concerned, and you'd say, you can't do this because this is bad for you. And you would, try to stop them from eating a dozen donuts. And so, but the same is true for an alcoholic. If they come home with a case of beer and drink them all, you can't just say, oh, well, he wants to. So I just thought that was really interesting.
But it's not kind of on a case-by-case basis. And
you want to skip over?
Yeah, why don't we just go ahead and skip over. There is a slide as far as the some of the statistics on drug and alcohol abuse.
And these were prepared by Chevelle. I do think it's interesting that from 2002 to 2006, then to 2020, the substance use disorder again among older Americans was expected to double.
And we've talked about that slide. And
yeah, well, and just one thing I wanted to note, it is an issue that a lot of people don't talk about. And it also leads into the broader issue that we see a lot too, is that people just don't want to have confrontation. And so they also don't like to think about death or the aging process. And so they may not be prepared. They don't want to meet with someone to talk about a power of attorney or a will, because they just don't want to address that. And then that can cause to a lot bigger problems later on.
So what we did want to start talking about though was, and Heather had mentioned this in her presentation yesterday as well, most of these relationships start off with good intent. These people, they're providing support during an illness. That's what my dad's companion was doing. And she was actually helping them after surgery. They move in to help with mobility or memory issues. And what they typically fail to do is seek respite care. And it's always unclear, are they just overcommitting themselves, or do they not want anyone else there? And they haven't, when the good motive shifts to a self-centered motive and they start exploiting the person, then they don't want a third party involved because they want to keep that person isolated. And some of the rationalizations are, I helped when no one else could. It cost a fortune to hire someone to do what I've done. And those kids are so ungrateful. And it could be that my siblings are so ungrateful. And the typical relationships are that adult child, a companion, a neighbor. And sometimes it can be just a flat out, it was a scammer.
But there definitely is some truth to the rationalization that it would cost a fortune to pay a private caregiver to do what I have done. Because oftentimes, like in Fred's case and in Alice's case, the children were helping. They were providing a lot of care and assistance that our clients needed. And it would have cost a lot to pay someone else. But what we recommend as another kind of soft tool is that let's put this in writing. Let's have a simple contract or a care agreement that spells out what you're going to do for the person and what you're going to be paid, because it is saving mom or dad money by them being able to live in their home in some cases. And that way, I think the goal would be that we would help them feel appreciated. And in those agreements, we even spell out sometimes the vacation time that the caregiver will have and who will fill in that time during that vacation time, try to kind of even that out so that the compensation that the caregiver takes doesn't snowball until the parent or individual is left with nothing. But
I have a question in the chat related
Sure.
directly to that. Someone asked specifically if a child takes in a parent and devotes full time to care, what's reasonable? How do you sort of determine that when you're looking at those types of agreements?
Abby, what do you usually recommend in like a care agreement?
So it varies based on what they're doing and how much time they are spending on the person. And there's also kind of two different kinds of payments that you can have. If someone moves in with you, you can charge them rent. And so you can have a simple lease and say, you're going to pay, X amount of dollars. And we would recommend just looking at what a reasonable rent for your area for, a 1-bedroom is. Should they pay twice your mortgage? No. But, for the rent piece, just what's reasonable. But then on the caregiving, typically what we kind of look at is try to talk with them about how many hours a week they're spending on it and, what the reasonable caregiving rate is if you hired, which is probably about $20 an hour. So that's kind of where we come into
And
it.
Abby, another thing that happens frequently, so mom or dad moves in with one of the children and they build an addition to the house and they charge it to mom or dad. Is that okay?
Well, we have had cases where it is okay, where mom and dad wanted to make that gift. And we've had cases where it wasn't okay, that gifts were not authorized and mom and dad had no clue that their money was being spent. So what we would typically recommend in that case, it does depend. Sometimes if there's no exploitation and the parent genuinely wants to help out the child or to pay for that expense, it's okay. But what we would recommend is similar to Sam's case, is put a loan in writing that can either be repaid by the child or paid off in kind with caregiving. So for example, I'm going to put a $30,000 addition on my home, and in return, you agree to, provide X, Y, and Z care for me for this period. But probably, that definitely should be talked about. And what we see usually is that the parent has no clue, that they're really happy in this new addition, but they had no clue that it was their money that paid for it.
Yeah. Another question came up. Aren't caregiver agreements essential if payments for care may end up with the elder seeking government assistance?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yep. And so that's a lot of times where they come into play, because we have to, the care agreement there has to be a written agreement for those payments to be made in order for those to qualify as payments as opposed to gifts if qualifying for aid. So we use them in that context as well, but they're also helpful even if you're not applying for benefits later on. But it's always hard for us. These cases are not easy, and we spend a lot of time up front really looking into who's the good person and who's the bad person, because it's not always easy to tell. And also what really is the best way forward. And it may not be necessarily filing a guardianship right away or reporting to law enforcement, but how can we try to make this person whole if possible?
Abby, why don't you skip the next slide and why don't you do the overview on what the different estate planning documents are?
Okay, sure. So as attorneys, we help clients with estate planning every day. And these documents are so important and can save so much expense and litigation down the road if properly drafted. And these documents also really empower individuals to make their own decisions as opposed to having to file a guardianship or be involved in some lawsuit down the road where a court is going to make that decision. And so the first, this is just kind of an overview of the documents that we draft regularly. The first is a general or financial power of attorney. And this names someone, an agent who can make financial decisions for an individual. And when we were preparing for this, Meredith said that when she gives this talk, she mentions that if you've seen one power of attorney, that means you've seen one power of attorney. And that's so true. They're all different. Even the statutory form has different provisions that you can elect or not elect. And so it's really just important when someone says, well, I'm the power of attorney, to look at ask for a copy of the document. We also, people get confused. They may be added as a power of attorney on a bank account, but there may not be actually an underlying agreement and the person is a little confused. But anyway, the important thing about the power of attorney is that it is effective when it is signed. And so we generally say, hey, and sometimes clients will pause when we say that, and they'll say, well, I don't want my son doing anything tomorrow. And we say, well, if you don't trust your son today to not act or not do anything unless either you need help or you ask him to help, then why would you trust him later on when you're incompetent? So let's talk a little bit more about who may be a better fit. And the power of attorney terminates upon death. It can also be revoked, or the agent can resign earlier, but a common misconception after someone passes away is that the power of attorney still is valid, and the agent actually loses all authority to act upon the individual's death. So if you
could have a power of attorney that would spring into effect in the event of someone's incapacity. But the problem is, those are problematic, because then if someone regained their capacity, the power of attorney arguably is no longer effective. So typically that's why we use the power of attorney that's effective the day it's signed. And if the client doesn't trust that person, it shouldn't be a power of attorney in the first place. And
and a lot of times the power of attorney, the financial power of attorney is needed. Something happens and it's needed pretty immediately. So either there's an accident or a health condition, and or in Alice's case, the exploitation was discovered, and we wanted that agent, the other agent, to be able to act the next day, right away. We didn't want to have to wait for Alice to go to an attorney, or I'm sorry, to a physician, and have that written statement that she's incompetent. So two other kind of general things to look for is just who is named as the agent. You can name one person, you can name multiple people to work together. The power of attorney will say whether they have to act together, whether they can act independently if there's co-agents. Another big thing that comes into these exploitation cases all the time is whether gifts are allowed under the power of attorney. The agent can only make gifts, meaning they can only spend the money on themselves or take cash out for themselves, if the power to make gifts is expressly granted in the power of attorney. And this is really where Alice's case turned, because at first law enforcement, kind of like all of us initially thought, well, it's her only daughter and she's taking care of her. And, we're not going to get upset about a few expenses at Walmart. But they looked at the power of attorney. The power of attorney did not provide the authority to make any gifts. And then they met with Alice, and Alice was very adamant that she had not authorized those and that she wanted to pursue legal charges. So, and then Paula already mentioned the accounting provision. There's other things you can put in there, but one thing that we like to do to provide a little more checks and balances is the provision allowing a third party to request an accounting at any time. And so that can help try to stop the exploitation if it's suspected. I
have a question about when is it too late to do a POA? Say there's been a hospitalization, a diagnosis of bipolar disorder or dementia, but there's no guardianship in place.
Well, we as lawyers, we have an obligation. We have an ethical obligation. We cannot, if a child calls us up and says, mom or dad needs this power of attorney, we can't draft that until we meet mom or dad. And the reason for that is real clear. The state bar wants to make sure that we're not helping someone
helping the exploiters.
Yeah, helping the exploiter, and that this is my client is the person who I'm drafting the power of attorney for, even if the child may be paying for it. And in those cases, the client needs to know that the child is paying for it. So Abby and I would sit down and talk with the person. It's very expensive to do a power of attorney when someone's in the hospital, because now we've got to go to the hospital and meet with that person. With COVID, there have been some situations that we've been able to meet with people virtually, where typically it's we're very cautious that we're not creating a problem for that person. But generally we have to meet with them in person. And so it's really a judgment call on the attorney's part. And so sometimes we get into these dueling powers of attorney, and one child would take the parent to one attorney and cancel a power of attorney. And in which case, sometimes the only way to resolve those cases is to bring a guardianship. And then the guardian can determine whether, to terminate all the powers of attorney and just serve.
And a diagnosis, a certain diagnosis, such as I think you mentioned schizophrenia or something like that, that doesn't automatically raise a red flag for us, because they can still be completely competent and able to sign these documents. But we do have situations where after talking with the client, we may be concerned, particularly if they say that they've been diagnosed with dementia, and particularly if they're coming in and they say, they have a will leaving things to certain people and then want to change it pretty drastically, and so we may sometimes ask them to get a note from their doctor, which will either say, yes, they're able to execute documents regarding financial matters and healthcare decisions. We've also gotten letters from physicians that say the individual can make decisions, sign documents regarding their healthcare decisions, and to us, that's glaringly that they're not able to make changes regarding financial or their financial decisions. So that's something that we do sometimes. But overall, we just meet with them and talk with them to get a good feel as to whether they're able to make their own decisions or not. So the healthcare power of attorney is for healthcare decisions. And the main difference, besides being for healthcare as opposed to financial matters, is that the healthcare power of attorney only kicks in when a healthcare provider determines that an individual is unable to make their own healthcare decisions. And so as long as the individual is able to communicate their own wishes, then the providers will speak with them. And that's why the third document, the HIPAA authorization, why it can be so important, because it allows healthcare providers to share protected healthcare information with named individuals. And the way we draft them is that it names your healthcare agents or whomever the person wants as being able to speak with their providers and have access to their records right away. And the benefit of that is when we're talking about, the importance of having a network looking out for you, is that if something happens, they send $10,000 to the Nigerian prince, or they just kind of start getting lost more and more, and people have concerns. If the individual is not admitting that anything is going on, then they can reach out to the providers directly, and that can be a great help. And so the next document is a last will and testament.
Before we jump into that, we did have a question about the difference between, I think there's some confusion with, especially the new law that went into effect in 2018 about when it's difference between durable POAs and healthcare POAs and how that law affected it. So the question is essentially, is it true that there is no longer a difference for health and durable POAs? All POAs are durable under the 2018 Act. I guess I'll just jump in there just to be clear. Health and POA, healthcare POA and durable POA, a financial POA, you can kind of try to separate those out in your mind. The big change that happened with the new law was that prior to that time, you had to say it was durable for it to survive, to be valid after someone became incapacitated. Once that law went into effect, you no longer have to say it's durable for it to essentially remain in effect after incapacity. But could you guys talk a little bit about the distinction between durable power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney and how those terms are used kind of in practice?
Yeah, I guess what it would be that if I have a power of attorney, so if I give Abby my power of attorney and then I become incompetent, she can still act on my behalf. That was the whole concept of durable. And that concept came in being in the 1970s. Before the 1970s, when I gave someone a power of attorney, as soon as I lost my capacity, the only choice was to go appoint a guardian. And then we came up with this concept of durable powers of attorney. But Meredith, you're right. The new act says the old law, before 2018, the law was you had to say the power of attorney was durable for it to be durable, for it to extend into any period of incapacity. But now the laws, the law provides that it's presumed to be durable unless we say otherwise. You could say in your power of attorney, in the event of my incapacity, hands off, no one can touch my money, but I don't know, that's not going to be of much benefit. And then
I would usually say durability is the default now. It's kind of the default rule. And you have to make an exception for it in the PAOA. And before the law, it was the inverse, right?
Right,
now,
exactly. And then you can't, and that's also why it's so important to read these documents. You can put any limitations you want in the power of attorney. And whereas the healthcare power of attorney, it's only in the event the attending physician, or if the person names a specific person to make that decision, only when that attending physician says this person no longer has capacity, and that's when the healthcare agent has the authority and to make decisions. And
would you say, as attorney, you generally draft you draft a durable POA and a healthcare POA as two separate? They theoretically could all be in one document. That's quite dicey, it seems, to have all of that in one document.
That would be some unusual drafting. You keep the financial piece separate from the healthcare piece, and that's real important. And now some people will include a living will along with a healthcare power of attorney, and that a living will is your declaration whether you'd want to die a natural death if you're terminal, in a coma, or suffering from advanced dementia. But yeah, we always keep financial matters and healthcare matters separate. It can be the same person, but they're two different documents. And Abby, why don't you go over just the
so real quickly,
estate planning documents.
On the will, it directs the disposition of an individual's estate. So you can say where you want your assets to go when you pass away. And it also appoints someone to serve as executor. So during your lifetime, your agent under your power of attorney can act for you. Upon death, that position kind of transfers, or it is your executor. And the executor has no authority to act during your lifetime. That's another common misconception. And similarly, like with Alice, I'm the executor and I'm the sole heir. Well, it doesn't matter because the will doesn't speak until death. And then there are trusts that we draft for individuals. Trusts can get really complicated, but they can also be very simple. The main thing is that when you're looking at these documents, you want to pay attention to who the trustee is, because that's the person who's in control of the trust assets. And a revocable trust generally can be changed or amended or revoked by the person creating the trust during their lifetime. An irrevocable trust generally can't unless all parties consent. And an irrevocable trust is kind of treated as your own assets, and an irrevocable trust is a separate being. It's often used in the Medicaid planning or special needs planning context.
So in the Medicaid planning, I'll take my assets, I'll put them in an irrevocable trust and wait 5 years. And then as long as I don't apply for Medicaid until 5 years after the date of the transfer of those assets, and as long as it's an independent trustee and I don't have any other strings attached to that irrevocable trust, then it's a non-countable asset.
Yes.
Is that right? So that's the typical, that's what you'd see in the Medicaid context with an irrevocable trust. There are many other uses to avoid estate tax. to avoid sometimes state income tax, but that's those are the general principles.
Well, and just a quick thing to note is that the way property is owned trumps the will. And so if you have a bank account named with a pay on death beneficiary, or you own something jointly with rights of survivorship, that property is going to pass automatically by law to whoever that joint owner or beneficiary is outside of the will. And so it's a lot of times it can mess up someone's plan because they don't quite understand what's happening. And commonly the exploiter will say, well, come on, mom, I'm helping you with your banking. So let me add me to your bank account, and then I can pay your bills. Well, that's not really required. She can be added as an agent, but instead she's added as a joint owner with rights of survivorship. And then upon her death, that child gets all of the assets. And that may be, in a lot of cases, the only asset there is.
We did have a question about a will. The question is a will the only type of document that allows the caregiver to access accounts and other business affairs after an individual passes away?
Well, you could, if the assets were titled in the name of a revocable trust, then the revocable trust survives death, and the revocable trust would typically name a successor trustee. So let's say that a caregiver was exploiting someone, or maybe it was a well-intentioned family member, but the parent names that third party as the successor trustee. Then after the death, they would just succeed and be able to show that they are now a trustee and manage those assets. But the only way to use a will to access assets would be if you're named as executor, and then you need to qualify before the court. But before you qualify and you get those what are called letters testamentary, you can't officially act as executor.
So an individual bank account would be frozen after death until the executor is qualified.
So what we thought we'd spend about the next 10 minutes on, and then we'll kind of open it up for questions, is going back to those case studies. Now we've kind of gone over what estate planning documents are, what are some of the ways to try to prevent elder exploitation, but also now what are the early signs? Well, one, excessive expressions of appreciation by the victim of either a caregiver, a friend, advisor, of their assistance. And Abby is just opening up an estate of a client, and unfortunately it was a client, it was a lawyer in Florida who had taken advantage of her and sold her all these financial investments. And what she did not, she talked in glowing terms about how great this person was. He took her to a car dealership when she needed to pick up a car out of service. And what she didn't understand was, and the children now understand, is that that attorney probably earned a couple $100,000 in fees on the investments that he was involved steering her into, which was just unfortunate. In my dad's case, he was talking about glowing terms of this companion, and my brothers and I really thought she was great. She was helping him out. We were all really pleased. And it was only when he got her involved in his finances that's when the trouble started. And then deferring to people who don't have qualifications. And again, that was my dad's case. His companion didn't have the financial experience to be able to handle assets that hit the investment, the type of investments that he had. And he had a child, myself, who met with him quarterly regarding his investments. That was an unusual shift. And then we talked about at the very beginning, Abby, I think this comes up in just about every case we have, the shuffling of assets between accounts for some, and I think in some cases, it's the person doesn't know what they're doing. But Abby, do you think the person who's exploiting, who's intentionally exploiting someone, I think they're trying to make a test run to see if anyone notices all these transfers.
Yeah, we can't quite figure out why they do it, but it does seem to be something that comes up in every case. And also we've talked, maybe it's that the individual just has never, had access to that type of cash before and just doesn't quite know how to handle it.
And when we were talking with Meredith and Chevelle as we were preparing this, that these cases, they're all kind of a little bit of a game of chess in that you're dealing with this person, you're trying not to, the victim's own judgment is at stake. In my dad's case, I needed to make sure that I preserved his dignity and wasn't challenging him that he was making bad decisions. And at the same time, letting him know that I thought some things were amiss. And so my advice always is don't react, and have a story that I call the roast beef story. And that is, and I think it relates to all these cases. In my dad's case, his companion got mad at me and did not want to be there, did not want to cook a holiday dinner. So I said I'd be happy to do it. And she told me the roast was in the oven out in the garage. And I went out and looked, and there was this roast, and it appeared to have been thawed, but it was actually frozen solid. So being a former prep cook, I was able to unthaw it and have a perfect dinner when she walked in the door. Her expectations were that there was going to be this disaster of a dinner, and that was going to be able to amplify family discord. And I mentioned that my father sometimes had one too many martinis, and that night he did, and he couldn't stop talking about this homemade gravy. So I just smiled across the table and offered to provide her with that recipe. But the whole point was, I'd seen so many of these cases, to the extent that you don't react to the family dysfunction, and it's really hard when we're counseling clients, if they're the adult children, don't buy in, don't take the bait. And when we're third parties walking into a situation, had I not been a lawyer who was engaged in this all the time, I might have come to Abby's office, and the first thing that I would have been talking about is what happened with this roast beef dinner. And it wouldn't make any sense. And so sometimes these, the point is there's typically a lot of dysfunction, and we always advise clients not to react. And Abby, in Fred's case, weren't you getting calls periodically about what people were saying on Facebook and how important that was?
Yeah, it is, like Paula mentioned, the reason we are able to do our jobs more effectively sometimes is because we don't have the emotional connection. And so we're able to look at things and try to identify what is an issue and what is not. And the family has years, a lifetime of experiences and ill feelings toward each other. And they're posting on Facebook or texting each other, and they want to send them to you so you can use them in court in the lawsuit. And we're trying to kind of back them up a little bit.
And then coordination among family and friends, just trying to figure, we're always, as part of our first steps, we're trying to figure out who is playing what role in the family and how we might be able to organize that so that we can get the best result. With my brothers, when I found out that there was these unusual movement of assets, I mentioned to my brothers, and that we all needed to make a concerted effort to go out and visit with my father, and to make sure that he wasn't isolated. So we were able to coordinate, and that was fortunate. Some families, there are not the relationships, and they can't get together. And it's also why people that might not have immediate family near, it's so important, as Heather mentioned in her presentation yesterday, for clients who are susceptible to exploitation to have a circle of trusted friends and advisors who can help in these situations. But then the other thing that we wanted to, that we kind of talk about, and that is don't get angry and be very clear and never apologize for intervening. So, and I guess this just is, in my dad's case, that's what I knew, never to get angry. I just had to detach. And even though it was personal to me, I just had to detach and step back and let my dad know that I was just doing what he always asked me to do to protect him and make sure everything was okay. I never accused anyone of anything. And because I knew that could also be a boomerang that would come back. But I did investigate, and I made clear, and I think that's another technique that we'll sometimes use, and whether it's me or whether it's Abby getting the call from the perpetrator or a child who's upset, is just to be clear and just keep repeating ourselves. when you walk into a situation where there is an exploiter, if you have, whether you're a social worker or whether you're law enforcement or an attorney, that person is exploiting, they're putting on a show for you. And they want to get validation from you as a person in authority. So I just make sure that I never, that I avoid giving any undue validation and but I try to apprise the situation and take a neutral standpoint. The other thing that would often happen is the person who's suspected of exploiting someone will be offended. In my dad's case, I've mentioned that I went up and I think I mentioned that I went up to his residence and spent 3 days with my computer. I got online access to all his accounts and I put them all in a spreadsheet to try to find out what, if any, money was missing. And his companion was very offended by that. And I said, well, I just need to look at all this. This is what my dad had always told me he wanted me to do. And that's why he appointed me as his attorney in fact. And when I finally mentioned that I found a lot of unusual transfers, but I could not find any outright wrongdoing. Then my dad called me up one day and his companion was on the phone and she was insisting through my dad that I apologize. And I said that I did not intend to offend anyone, but I didn't have anything to apologize for. I was doing my job. And again, it's the sense that these exploiters are trying to get the victim to understand that you are the person who is the problem, not them. And if something's outside of my area and I can't help, and I would just say so. But if I think that something's amiss, I'm not going to say everything's okay, but I'm going to say, I don't have any authority to take any action here, but I am concerned that there's something that's not quite right. And again, it's that I'm not validating that person. We all have those of us who work in the area have a pretty good sixth sense about when things are not going well.
And so all of this kind of is leading up to why we always look to alternatives to guardianship first before filing that petition. And guardianships can be great and they're very useful. We work with them day in, day out. They require accountability on behalf of the guardian because there's annual accountings that have to be filed. The guardian is bonded, which provides some protection for the individual, but it's also one of the more drastic remedies, and it takes the individual's rights away. And so if we can maintain some of those rights and still keep the client protected, that's always what we try to do first. And so if you, the first thing, coordination among family and friends whenever possible, it sounds so simple, and it is something that, doesn't necessarily, you don't have to necessarily pay anybody to do this, but it can be so important and helpful. And that's whether it's family members or friends, church members, physicians. But we tell clients all the time, they'll be upset because one child has moved in with mom or dad, and now, they're questioning the household expenses. And we say, how often do you visit your mom? So often they don't come to us until they've realized all the money is gone. And then when we ask about the, prior relationship, they say, well, they visit maybe once a year. So regular visits to stay in touch and be involved to the extent possible. Also, as we mentioned, just involvement with finance, if that makes sense, whether it's having them involved on a day-to-day basis or just sending the duplicate statements. And then the powers of attorney are so helpful. I mean, those documents alone, a lot of the time can help avoid a guardianship. We also have cases where we get together and draft a revocable trust so that the trustee is able to manage those assets and make sure that they're protected, but that everyone's cared for. And then also, special needs trusts and representative payees and whatnot. But we did want to leave a few minutes for questions, and I think we're coming to the end of our time. So Meredith, are there any questions?
Oh, yes, there are many questions. I've been trying to hold them off, but knowing that you all still had so much good content to cover. One of the earlier questions that we received sort of relates to guardianship and whether or not, and what are your thoughts about court-ordered mediation and a guardianship? And do you, the person noted that you seem to really work to find alternatives to guardianship in your practice, but if a guardianship is filed, do you see mediation being a valuable tool, and have you used it with success in your practice?
Mediation is great tool if everyone is willing to sit down and mediate. There's something about that, having that third party going from room to room. We're able to resolve a lot of disputes, and in the guardianships, it's becoming more and more prevalent. We've only used it in a handful of cases, but it sometimes works out really well.
Yeah, I will say anecdotally, what I hear, one of the issues is that the cost can be prohibitive because it is $150 an hour for the mediator fee. And so if there isn't assets, that can be a challenge. But yeah, I've sort of heard similar feedback. Another question we received was, let's see, one about excuse me, there's a lot. What are your thoughts on placing the healthcare power of attorney in the Secretary of State database?
We typically don't, and just because we just typically have the client, we provide them with extra copies and have them provide that to their medical provider and also provide it to the healthcare agent and tell them to have that conversation. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that, but it just seems to be an easy way to access that. And then with elderly clients, I always tell them to have those available. And in one retirement community, people would put it in a tube in their refrigerator so that the EMT officers would always know where it is. But in my dad's case, we had it taped to the back of a pantry door.
Another question was, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll make this last one. Is it true that the real estate statutes still require the durable financial POA to be filed to be effective for the agent to handle real property transactions?
That is correct, because if it's not of record, we're a race jurisdiction, meaning it's a race to the courthouse. If something's not of record related to real estate, it doesn't count, it doesn't matter. So that's why you record a power of attorney. You have to record it to engage in real estate transactions.
Yeah.
And we're finding more and more banks are requiring that they be recorded. That's not a legal requirement that we're aware of, but more of a compliance issue that the banks have come up with. So sometimes clients say, I thought you said this didn't have to be recorded. Well, it doesn't. I keep banking where you are. You might need.
I think that's something that the new law, a change that people just haven't gotten used to yet. Because after incapacity under the prior law, you had to have it recorded, but that's not required under this new statute. But I think it's still something that people expect, and so a lot of times third parties, if they don't see a recorded POA, they'll push back, and so it ends up getting recorded to help facilitate transactions. But yeah, I see Kevin has come on. I'm getting
it's such a great session.
I'm sorry that I didn't get to all the questions in the chat box. I feel so bad, but
that's okay. It's a great session.
I warned Paula and Abby. I said that people are gonna, it's gonna be a feeding frenzy, and it was. So
no problem. Well, Meredith, if you want to continue answering some of those questions in the chat, feel free. But I want to say thank you to both Meredith, Abby, and Paula for the wonderful session. Oh my goodness, I think we could have probably sat here for another couple of hours and listen to the presentation and give more questions for the panelists. So thank you, you all, for your presentation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, Paula, if you want to stop sharing your screen, and then I'm going to give a few wrap up. There you go. Thank you. I'm going to give a few wrap up and closing comments. I want to first thank all the board members that helped put this conference together, and all the speakers that did a wonderful job of making this conference come together. We had I know we had 317 people registered for the conference, and I think we've had over at least 160 each day online at any given time. So again, thank you for that. A few other final wrap up items is just remember within the next week, we'll have you a conference survey that's going to be sent electronically. And then we will send you, once you complete the survey electronically, then you will actually receive a certificate for attendance. I know in the conference program, we mentioned about continuing education credits, and just make sure that if you're going to do those, you'll need to fill out or pull down the form for the partial credit certification form for the North Carolina State Bar Board if you are looking for those CEUs, because those were just finalized today. Actually, we got final confirmation for those CEUs. So again, if you need any documentation for the CEUs, if you need anything else that'll become to the partnership, please let us know that. I do want to give some other final thoughts and thank yous to, again, AARP of North Carolina, Steve Hahn and Lisa Regal, who helped us procure, financial sponsorship so that we could have Allison Crossman, who has been our magnificent host. So I highly tell you that if you need someone to host a virtual conference like this, reach out to Allison. She's done a fabulous job for us. So thank you, Allison. And then, of course, our North Carolina Senior Medicare Patrol Program was the other financial sponsor for the conference so that we could make this a free conference for you all. We hope next year we'll be in person. We really do, because we miss seeing you. Hey, I guess I miss having that box lunch during our annual meeting, but it's always great to have the conversations in person and to be able to speak with each other in the hallways during the session and seeing folks that may have the exhibit tables there. So we totally miss those areas, but we really appreciate everything that you've done. So at this time, I'm going to ask some of the board members that if I have forgotten anything to send me a message directly, but I do want to go into some of into our annual meeting. And I'm actually going to share my screen to bring up a document because I would kind of like to give a state of the, I guess the state of the state for the partnership. And in that, hopefully you are seeing my screen. If someone could just chat to me directly in the message to let me know that you are seeing my screen.
We see it, Kevin.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you. So I'm just going to run through here. Let me take off the chat message here. So at the annual meeting, we normally just talk about, what is our membership? You said that we're composed of individuals, agencies, business members that support the mission. For this year, we actually had 8 organizational members. And remember, an organizational member can have as many from the agency for only $50. But again, 2 of those individuals would be the only voting members. And then, of course, we had 9 individual members. So it's not saying that we had very few members, but within those 8 organizational members, you could have as many as we want, just 2 voting members. Our budget, the anticipated revenue and expenses for 2021 were $7,550 and $7,434 respectively. A year-end report will be available by July 2021. And Ann will give a breakdown on our budget report here in a little bit. Education committee, wow, this is going to be a lot. So just know that our partnership is committed to providing training and technical assistance to prevent, stop, and remedy abuse, neglect, and exploitation of older adults and adults with disabilities. It does so at the bi-monthly general meetings in addition to the annual conference in May. The partnership held 5 meetings of the whole between July 1st, 2020 and March 30th, 2021. Of course, all those being virtually this year. Experts and their topics consisted of the following. July 15th, we offered guidance to penetrate the confusion around elder exploitation and under cover of authority from private attorney Charlotte Ann Alexander and Assistant DA Jessica Spencer from the 31st Prosecutorial District. September 16th, of course, it was virtual. We offered 2 sessions. UNC School of Government, Amy Wall showcased the North Carolina Elder Protection Network, an online hub connecting professionals in the field, as well as a new book, Legal Framework for North Carolina's Elder Protection System. The North Carolina Conference of District Attorneys, Kimberly Overton Spanos, spotlighted how and what the conference contribution is to bringing wrongdoers to justice, as well as forthcoming manual for prosecutors to guide prosecutors working these cases. And our very own Nancy Warren helped with that, with helping with the prosecutor's guide.
And so did John Marin.
And so did John. Thank you for that reminder. And November the 18th, we had Angela Ellis and Felisa Farrell on the DSS Director's Roadmap. As we know, Ellis is the Director of Greene County Social Services in Snow Hill, and Farrell is the Director of Rockingham Department of Health and Human Services. These two are the chairs for the North Carolina Association of County Directors of Social Services Adult Services Committee. Wow, I can't believe I remembered that acronym. Then January the 20th, we had DHHS Stephanie Williams on housing insecurity, why it matters, the extent of the problem and solutions. March 17th, AARP Foundation Program Manager E.A. Casey on social isolation and loneliness among elderly and disabled adults, how to identify it, why it matters, and tech and no tech interventions. Then, of course, the past 3 days, May 17th to the 19th, we had our conference. So I'm really not going to run through all that since we've already, you all know about the conference the past couple of days. And this was a huge undertaking. And we had initially conceived of having an in-person option, and it took a village to execute it, but our village included Allison Crossman, Ann Elmore, Autumn Cox, Glenn Mitchell, John Marin, Dr. Karen Bullock, Catherine Lanier, myself, Kimberly Overton Spanos, Laura Cogman, Laura Schlabach, Lisa Regal, Mercedes Meredith Stone Smith, Nancy Warren, Pam Palmer, Paula Kohut, Roger Manis, Sarah Smith, Chevelle Mavens through most of the last year, Stephanie Bias, and Tadra Martin. So thank all of you for helping do that. Again, the presentation materials can be found on the website. And after today, we will get the recordings up hopefully by tomorrow for the entire conference. The Education Committee experienced a partial change of the guard as Chevelle Maven's departure and the addition of Tadra Martin. And Tadra is a supervising attorney for the North Carolina Disability Rights. And she and Ann Elmore, and Ann's, as we know, is with the North Carolina Secretary of State Securities Division, Investor Protection, Business Outreach, and Advanced Healthcare Directive Registry Awareness. As we stated earlier, our next meeting for the whole general membership is July 21st, 9:30 until 11:30 or noon. Speaker details have not been solidified yet, but we will be announcing those. Just know that we will have that on their website, along with information on how you can attend the meeting. Meanwhile, the Education Committee invites suggestions for speakers and topics that enlighten, enable, and motivate progress against elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Share your thoughts. Please reach out to Ann Elmore or Tadra Martin for these to give them those suggestions. Now I turn to the Advocacy Committee. They're a standing committee that's responsible for activities related to advocating and public policy and legislation that enhance the safety and well-being of older adults and adults with disabilities who are vulnerable to abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Any interest from advocacy is welcome to participate. The partnership joined with the Senior Tara Legislature, the North Carolina Social Services Consortium, AARP North Carolina, the Coalition on Aging, and the North Carolina Governor's Advisory Council to support legislation to improve adult protective services in North Carolina. Collaboration between APS staff and the North Carolina Division of Aging and Adult Services, and the partnership continues using actual APS stories from county departments of social services to educate North Carolina legislators about the issues of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation facing their constituents. The partnership is an active participant with the National Network of State Elder Justice Coalitions and the National Adult Protective Services Association, NAPSA. Awareness, John Marin and Stephanie Bias. As John, as you know, he's with the Investor Education Program with the Securities Division of North Carolina Department of Secretary of State. And Stephanie Bias is here at the Department of Insurance, and she's our SMP Program Coordinator. They make many presentations across the state each year regarding financial fraud and abuse and Medicare fraud. At each of those presentations, they raise awareness of North Carolina Partnership to address adult abuse and its work to expand public understanding of the issues of victimization of older adults and adults with disabilities. Understandably, the COVID-19 pandemic and the mass gathering restrictions had a huge impact on awareness activities. While in-person events and presentations were prohibited, the number of virtual presentations increased, meant that while the actual number of events conducted declined, the effective number of people reached stayed about the same. In 1920, the Investor Protection and Education Services team of the North Carolina Department of the Secretary of State conducted 117 educational outreach events. Approximately 14,543 people either attended, listened to, and or viewed the events. Between June 1st, 2020 and April 2021, the Investor Protection and Education Services team conducted 47 virtual events reaching 13,455 people. Several of these were recorded, so they continue to be seen by people after the fact and all across. We continue to promote the partnership in appropriate settings and whenever we convene the North Carolina Senior Consumer Fraud Task Force. Stephanie Bias conducted 116 group outreach and media efforts for the SHIP program at the Department of Insurance and for the NCSMP Senior Medicare Patrol Program, which included awareness of the mission and partnership of NCPAAA, reaching a total of 18,247 citizens comprised of Medicare beneficiaries, caregivers, valued aging and social service professional partners, as well as the public. These opportunities occurred in all 100 counties across the state of North Carolina, including media efforts. Communications. The Communications Committee was delighted to welcome the co-chair, Autumn Cox, in September of 2020. Communications Committee co-chairs Laura Slovak and Autumn Cox worked on multiple projects to ensure open and smooth communication skills, channels between the executive board members, the conference planning committee, as well as communications to the general members of the North Carolina Partnership to Address Adult Abuse. During the last fiscal year, Autumn and Laura have invited web designer Will Breen to offer his presentation on the partnership website, changes, upgrades, updates. They have continued to update the website with to date with the information regarding training sessions, past and future meetings of other professional educational networking opportunities. They have also continued to generate emails to general members, executive board members, as well as conference planning members regarding information for past and future meetings, including Survey Monkeys for availability of meetings, meeting minutes, speaker information, and necessary reminders. And finally, they have continued to work closely with the Education Committee co-chairs regarding all communications via conference flyers, emails, and website updates, session recordings, YouTube links, and Facebook posts and alerts to ensure a smooth virtual conference for May 17th to 19, 2021. And then, of course, with our bylaws, we've actually reviewed the bylaws. There have been no new changes that have been brought to our attention to make for this year. With that, that is our conference in review for the past year. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And at this time, I'm going to ask Laura Slovak if she would like to share her screen for the meeting minutes from our last meeting. And she'll scroll through those for us. Give us just a second for Laura. Let's see. I hope I didn't catch Laura off guard.
Kevin, it's Pam, and I am going to be sharing the minutes as soon as I find them.
Okay, sorry about that.
Let's see, I am having trouble finding them right now. Sorry.
Well, Pam, if you want to go ahead and share your treasury report.
Well, that's right with hers also.
Okay.
PowerPoint. I've got so much stuff on here. Show all windows.
Pam, if you go to the website, it's all under the meetings tab. So the meeting minutes would be from the March meeting, and then all of your reports are under the May meeting.
Look at that. Autumn is so efficient. I already have those posted to the conference website.
Well, see, I was here talking and Autumn jumped in. I forgot to unmute. Yeah, so they are on the website, Kevin. If you can share them, it would be great.
Okay. I'll pull up real quick. Bear with me just a second, folks. Oops. Autumn, remind me where to go to the website.
I found them. Hold
Oh,
on.
Go
Can
ahead.
let me share.
Go ahead and share your screen, Pam.
Yeah, okay, I'm sharing now. Okay. You are sharing your screen. All right. Let me close this out. And I don't know what this is for, so I'm moving that. All right.
If you'll make those larger, it'd be great.
If I can, I will.
In the middle, straight up, you see the plus sign. Click on that. To the right of that. Oh.
I do not see a plus sign.
Straight above the partnership logo, you'll see a negative and a plus sign. Go above it.
There it is. Okay, I had something covering it. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to read it. It is posted on the website. So I'm just going to scroll through. Our wonderful secretary takes absolutely wonderful minutes, and I think she puts down every word that is said.
John Marion posted Laura is amazing, and that is correct. She does a great job.
She does, absolutely. Okay, so those were the minutes from the meeting on March 17th. And here is the treasurer's report for today. We started out with a beginning balance of $12,991.01. We had total membership income of $590. We had total sponsorship of $6,500 with total income of $7,090. We had expenses of a total of $4,099.61. So we have a balance now of $15,981.40. That includes the $3,000 reserve that we have set aside. If you had looked at the budget for last year, I basically changed the date. And since this has been a crazy year, we're just going to assume that this is kind of going to be what we have next year.
Gotcha. Thank you, Pam. If you want to stay right there, what we will do, if some of the board members would like to unmute, I do need a motion to, we'll start with the minutes first. If there is a motion and a second.
I move that we accept the minutes.
Okay, and I'll second it. This is Nancy.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Nancy. If all those members and board members would like to unmute, and we have a motion and a second on the floor to accept the minutes as written. So moved, say aye.
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 Those opposed? The motion passes. Now, Pam has also shared the treasurer's report, and she has provided a budget for the new year. Is there a motion to accept her budget along with her proposed budget as well?
I will move.
John, and is there a second?
A second.
That is Stephanie Bias is a second there. Thank you both. So therefore, we have a motion on the floor with a motion and a second to accept the treasurer's report and the budget. If you approve, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Not hearing anyone opposed, the motion passes. Thank you, Pam, so much for that. At this time, we're going to go into the committee reports. As I said, actually in the committee, in the written narrative of our past year, we've looked at the bylaws, but we really have no suggestions of making any changes to the bylaws this year. So now I'm going to turn it over to the Communications Committee. Autumn, would you like to make any comments?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. Just want to thank everyone again for attending the past 3 days. All communications have already been posted to the website. So if you were in a session and you were, jumping back and forth or wanted to attend a different session, you will be able to watch all the recordings, get all the PowerPoints. So everything is up except for the recordings from this afternoon, and we expect those to be up by tomorrow. The other announcement that I have is if any members have educational opportunities upcoming, feel free to share those with either Laura S. or myself, and we can get those posted to our website under the upcoming opportunities. So again, that is a benefit for our members. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you, Autumn, and thank you, Laura S. as well. Let's see. Ann and Tadra, Education and Conference Committee.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank all of you for being here still. I'm so glad we still have so many people on this call. Please know that pulling together this conference really took a village. The names you saw listed, that was heavy duty work for a lot of people. The more people we have contributing, the greater the spectrum of voices that we have to that can contribute to what it is we need to move forward, but also the more hands we have so that the labor for any one is so much less. So we truly thank all of the partners who have helped us out, even though some of them were not members, they contributed, and we urge you to join with your attendance, but also with your membership, and by helping us design programs, come up with education opportunities that truly will move all of us forward in this, because none of us is getting any younger, and we've got a vested interest in making things so much better. And special thanks to Tadra. She's very new to all of this, and she has hit the ground running. Thank you, Tadra.
And thank you, Ann, and thank you, Tadra. Tadra, do you have something you would like to say?
No, not at all. I don't know if you can hear me. I think Ann summed it up very nicely. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you both. John and Stephanie with our awareness committee, would you have anything that you'd like to add for you both?
John and
I think John is muted still.
John, unmute yourself, honey.
Sorry. I don't have anything much more to add. The report that we gave in the written report, I think, sort of speaks for it. I will just continue to make a plug to everybody that hasn't joined. I put the link to the membership page in the chat. I hope that if you come away with nothing from this 2.5 day conference, is that there's a lot of collaboration that's going on, and we hope that you are inspired and will join the effort. Get your organization to join as well. Stay plugged in with us. Anything that we can do as the executive team, let us know, and we'll try to make it happen. So, Stephanie, what do you got?
Well, as I echo what John has said, it does take a village, and anything that you have going on in which you need advice, guidance, help. As John and I both say, we have been the dream team for so long, making presentations and making sure that folks are educated. We're the boots on the ground educators. We educate so they don't make these bad choices, or if they've made these bad choices, where we can refer them to begin their quest to unravel some bad choices. We want to make sure that our constituents that we represent, because I feel like we represent these folks as well, families, caregivers, beneficiaries, elderly, those that are on disability, or folks that are disabled and going through that process. Make sure that they have the most accurate information that they can have to make the best informed choice for their care, for their particular situation. And that goes in all spectrums of care, not just their health care, but their financial and emotional well-being as well. So anything that we can help you with, if you need us to come and speak to a group or whatever, our services are free and confidential. And at the Department of Insurance from the S&P and SHIP division, we are neutral, objective, and unbiased. So, which goes contrary to my name, but we are neutral, objective, and unbiased. So please reach out, and thank you so much for your attendance and for the hard work that this team has put on, and for our speakers and presenters, and all the wonderful questions that I've seen in this chat box have just been phenomenal.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. And Nancy Warren with our advocacy committee, we want to come on and give any final thoughts and messages as well?
Hey everybody, it's good to see you all. No, I think the report pretty much said it all, and just know that we are on the side of adult protective services professionals, and that's our mission and our goal, and we'll continue with that.
Thank you, Nancy. And again, I want to give out some final reminders. Remember, June 15th is World Elder Abuse Day. And then again, of course, our next partnership meeting, the statewide meeting for general meeting, is July 21st. We hope that you will join us. As Pam put in the chat, she says the new year begins July 1st. We want you to become a member for the new year, and we appreciate that. And I definitely want to also thank, before we end today, that we could not have done this conference with couldn't have done it without Allison Crossman. So Allison, do you want to turn your camera on so we can all at least see you? I know we would probably give you a standing ovation if we were actually in a room. So I know Allison has had some microphone issues for the day, but we have done a great job. I don't see Allison coming on yet.
Yeah, so she's on there.
She is? Okay, I just can't see her. So
yep, she's
thank
there.
you, Allison, for your hard work. It's a lot behind the scenes, and the group that she's had to put up with. So I know that we have thrown emails after emails to her. So thank you for all that you've done for us and for the board. So again, thank everyone for attending the conference. We look forward to having you next year. We hopefully to be in person. So again, thank you so much. And we will ask Allison if she will close the meeting for us and end the conference.